Chapter 591. Crackle, crackle, crackle. Xiong-Kahu stood to the side, blocking poplar fruit behind him. He looked at Fat Dragon with a pained expression. To be exact, he was looking at his thick fingers frantically typing on the keyboard. It was as if he was looking at a delicate flower being bitten by a dog. He had the urge to chop this bastard up with a knife. Fat Dragon did not sense the danger at all. His eyes were shining, and he was typing codes that no one could understand in the command prompt. He said without raising his head, "Fruit, where did you find this computer? There is actually such a talent in the country. His idea of opening up a new path is very innovative in the eyes of the whole world." "How is it?" Poplar Fruit asked curiously. "Can this computer be used? Why can't it be used?" After Fat Dragon finished typing the code, he habitually pressed the Enter key with his middle finger. Then, he stared at the computer that was crazily refreshing Windows and said, "Don't think of it as a normal computer. Just think of it as an enlarged version of a superphone. TSK. This configuration is still very high. Of course, it is not without shortcomings." Fat Dragon clicked his mouse twice and continued to ramble on. "This guy is called Kybird Rookie. He even left his name in the system. This is not a good habit for a hacker. I digress. He has the ability, but compared to Fat Dragon, there's still a big gap. Anyway, I think this system has a lot of loopholes. The functions are too simple and crude. It needs to be improved." Fat Dragon's words were somewhat unconstrained. He said this and that, which made Poplar Fruit confused. Not to mention Kiki, who was bored from the beginning. "Aya, Papa, Kiki wants to go out and play." Kiki forcefully pulled Poplar Fruit's hand, stomped her feet, and shouted angrily, "Papa!" The sweet voice made Poplar Fruit temporarily shift his attention to her. "Go, you have to be careful. Don't go to the mountains with your brothers and sisters to play. Don't dirty your clothes, do you understand?" After Poplar Fruit became a father, nagging had become a habit. Zheng Yujia, who was next to him, covered her mouth and snickered. "What are you laughing at?" Poplar Fruit asked Kiki to go out and join his friends who were leaning against the window. Then, he turned around and glared at Zheng Yujia. "I'm laughing at you for being long-winded. You're just like an old mother." Zheng Yujia retorted without hesitation. "I'm worried about you. As a father, I'm worried, so I said a few words. How can you call me long-winded?" Poplar Fruit said with dissatisfaction, "You're still young. When you have children, you'll know what it means to worry." "Aya, little brother Yang, how old are you? You say I'm young, as if you're already old." Zheng Yujia was lectured by Poplar Fruit like an old man. She immediately raised her eyebrows and shouted. The two were bickering like enemies. At this time, Fat Dragon had a preliminary understanding of the situation of the system. He pulled out a data cable and connected it to his mobile phone. Fat Dragon's mobile phone really can't be called a mobile phone. After Fat Dragon's DIY assembly, this overly thick mobile phone not only has strong performance, but also can be used as a portable hard drive. As much as 1 TB of storage space, it was stuffed with a lot of hacking tools that Fat Dragon programmed himself. This is also the reason why Fat Dragon didn't bring a computer with him this time. Xiong-Kahu looked at Fat Dragon with a puzzled face as he used a rope to tie a brick to the computer. He couldn't hold it in anymore. His big hand pressed on Fat Dragon's mobile phone. He looked at Fat Dragon with a vigilant face and asked, "Little Fatty, what are you doing?" "AI, sir, can you not interfere with my work?" Fat Dragon hugged his head and cried out, "What am I doing? Of course I'm programming. I don't blame you if you don't understand, but why do you keep interrupting me?" Hee. Although this old man doesn't understand, I'm not senile. You just hit my computer and I'll tolerate it. Now you want to hit it with a brick? You don't want to leave here alive, do you? Xiong-Kahu glared at him with his bell-like eyes and shouted with a murderous aura. There were only two kinds of people who could ignore Xiong-Kahu's murderous aura. One was a freak like Poplar Fruit, who was a level higher than him. The other was a nerd like Fat Dragon, who didn't know what it meant to seek death. He only felt that the surroundings were a little cold, but he didn't believe that Xiong-Kahu would do anything to him. He thought to himself, old man, don't think that I don't know that you only know how to scare people." "Fruit." Fat Dragon was unreasonably interrupted by Xiong-Kahu. so he could only helplessly ask Poplar Fruit for help. Why is your master always in my way? Poplar Fruit walked over, but Xiong jumped out and blamed Fat Dragon. I'm in your way? Who told you to have evil intentions? Poplar Fruit, look at this brick. You must be planning to break our computer. Also, you hit it so hard just now. Although I don't understand, you didn't hit it so hard in the past. Poplar Fruit looked at the two of them and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Master, you've really misunderstood. This isn't a brick. It's just a phone that looks more like a brick. And Fat Dragon, you also need to change your bad habits. Why did you hit the keyboard so hard? There's a mainframe under the keyboard. Our computers will be used by our children in the future. Take it easy and don't break it. Poplar Fruit didn't help either of them. At noon, Poplar Fruit brought Zheng Yujie to find Kiki for lunch. Fat Dragon, however, refused to move. He was completely focused on this new toy. Not only that, but he was also confused about the outside world. Poplar Fruit called him a few times, but this guy actually took out a wrinkled 50 yuan note from his pocket and handed it to Poplar Fruit. Fruit, I don't want to eat anymore. Help me buy an M&A. I want a Big Mac. Yes, a set meal. M&A your ass. Poplar Fruit was speechless. This guy thought that he was still in his hometown in Guangdong province. How could he buy a M&A in the middle of nowhere? Poplar Fruit had no choice but to finish eating and give it to him. Xiong who didn't want to give up, also brought food over. When they returned, Poplar Fruit found that Fat Dragon had left the computer and was sitting cross-legged without caring if the floor was clean or not. Beside him was a pile of strange equipment bought from the county. What are you doing? Zheng Yujie curiously pulled open a plastic bag to take a look. Don't move, Fat Dragon shouted. Don't lose the parts. His voice was filled with dissatisfaction and almost scared Zheng Yujie. TSK, I won't move then. Zheng Yujie threw down the bag in disdain. She also saw that there were a bunch of wires and screws inside. This made her completely lose interest. Chapter 592. Fat Dragon was like a different person when he was fiddling with the electronic equipment. His thick fingers didn't seem clumsy, but they were so flexible that Poplar Fruit was surprised. After a while, he assembled a receiver pod that looked like a radar. Fat Dragon didn't just assemble the receiver pod for the TV model. He also took apart the bulging component box and replaced it with the parts he needed. Using this to surf the internet? How do you do it? Poplar Fruit asked curiously. Do you look at the sky and capture a satellite signal? Then you forcefully decode it and change it to our dedicated network channel? Poplar Fruit's imagination was also more imaginative, but Fat Dragon shook his head and looked at Poplar Fruit like he was an idiot. He said, How is that possible? Do you think you are writing a novel? If satellites could be so easily decrypted and controlled by us, why would the United States need to develop a long-range weapon to attack satellites? Fat Dragon asked, Do you know how a mobile phone can surf the internet? Through what base station? Poplar Fruit really didn't understand this knowledge, but he did read a foreign report about the 4G network. There seemed to be such a term in it. Base station? You know, Fat Dragon was speechless. Then why did you mention satellites? Fat Dragon didn't know that Poplar Fruit was purely rote in this scientific knowledge. He didn't really understand it, but he still explained to Poplar Fruit the role of a base station in wireless network signal transmission. You can think of a base station as a radio transceiver station for information transmission. Forget it. You don't need to know how it works. Anyway, you just need to know that without a base station, your mobile phone can't surf the internet. Poplar Fruit took out his mobile phone and asked doubtfully, Now my mobile phone can't surf the internet, but why can a wireless network card still connect? It seems like it can connect, but the internet speed is very slow. Nonsense. Your mobile phone is a Unicom 3G card. The base station's coverage is higher in the big cities, but it won't work in the countryside. Now that you are in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, you can barely make a phone call. It would be weird if you could still connect to the internet. Fat Dragon complained. He didn't see Xiong looking at him with murderous eyes. The wireless network card is a mobile or telecom card, right? Mobile has the widest coverage area. It has more signal towers. The telecom base station is more interesting. It has an advantage in the countryside, as the coverage area is larger than a Unicom. Fat Dragon laughed. Of course, deep in the mountains, no matter which one, there's no one would use it. Who would build a base station? What you received is probably the signal from the base station near the road. The base station's signal didn't disappear for no reason. After its energy is transmitted over a certain distance, it can't reach the reception range of our mobile phones because of the loss. That's why we need many base stations to cover it. There are no base stations in the mountains, so the signal is very weak here. Naturally, the internet speed is very slow. Then how do you do this? Poplar Fruit asked as he pointed at Fat Dragon's receiver pot. The principle is very simple. It's like a radar. This receiver pot will gather the weak refracted signals in the air, and then through our receiver, the signal will be strengthened. Fat Dragon explained, but because it used to receive satellite signals, I just modified the receiver so that it can handle network signals. So that's how it works. Poplar Fruit suddenly understood. He watched as Fat Dragon connected the receiver pot to a common Wi-Fi router on the market. After a while, it formed a wireless connection from wire to wireless. Poplar Fruit didn't ask any more questions. He didn't understand it anyway, so there was no need to get to the bottom of it. Fat Dragon must have his own reasons for making it so complicated. Looking at the receiver pot, Poplar Fruit frowned and asked, "Is this considered illegal?" Satellite TV receiver pots are illegal. How is it legal? Fat Dragon laughed. At most, it's a super network card. He asked for the MacBook that Poplar Fruit brought before coming over. Fat Dragon suddenly smiled mysteriously. Fruit, compared to the ones below, this is really not illegal. Fat Dragon copied a few software from his phone to Poplar Fruit's computer. Then, somehow, he connected to the wireless network. The software began to crazily refresh the green data. Rows of codes and numerical symbols that Poplar Fruit couldn't understand flowed across the screen like a waterfall. Poplar Fruit was no stranger to this scene. Wasn't it like the data flow that hackers attacked in the movies? After a while, Fat Dragon seemed to have logged in to some management page. He then pressed a few buttons on the computer. Poplar Fruit remembered what Fat Dragon said just now. He asked in confusion, "What are you doing?" "This is the management backend of the Guishan Telecom database," Fat Dragon replied absent-mindedly while nervously tapping on the keyboard. "Don't be noisy. I only have 1 minute." However, Fat Dragon was very fast. He finished his actions in less than 30 seconds. He immediately exited the page and let out a sigh of relief. He turned to Poplar Fruit and said, "I didn't expect the management backend of the telecom to be upgraded after not seeing it for half a year. I just got the highest authority, but because the password is updated every minute and there is no key, I will be discovered if I stay in there for more than a minute." Fat Dragon smiled casually, as if the dangerous intrusion just now was as simple as opening a bottle cap and drinking water. "Now, I've created a new virtual ChinaNet account in there. It allows me to surf the internet for free with unlimited time and unlimited data flow. There's free internet." Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. His wireless network card cost 200 yuan a month. "Of course there is," Fat Dragon said with a smile. "This account is for the whole year. I just modified the backstage data and added the payment record in the general database. No one could find any loopholes. There seemed to be no package for the whole year. But let's just say that there is one. This is the free internet you were talking about?" Poplar Fruit was speechless. "Is there a need for that? Can't we just buy an account online for a year? Doesn't that cost money?" Fat Dragon nagged. "Now it costs 300 yuan a month and 3,000 yuan a year. Spending money is a small matter. We don't lack money." Poplar Fruit grabbed the computer. "Give it to me. 3,000 yuan to set a good example for the children. It's money well spent. Xiaohan doesn't know much about technology. Don't worry about this chapter. There are some parts that don't match reality. Let's just laugh it off." Chapter 593. After connecting to the internet, Fat Dragon randomly found a movie to download from Poplar Fruit's computer. In the end, the skyrocketing internet speed was shocking. It was 10 megabytes per second. Poplar Fruit's eyes widened. He had only experienced such speed in school. The main thing is that there are not many people using it. Fat Dragon explained. There's no one nearby who uses a mobile phone to access the internet, so we could take up most of the bandwidth. Fat Dragon, can you try to use my computer to play a video for the one on the table? Or rather, we can have a video chat between the two of us. Poplar Fruit patted his shoulder and asked, what are you planning to do? Fat Dragon moved to the table and said, if it's just to play a video file remotely, it shouldn't be a problem. I just need to write a video player program. But if you want a video chat like QQ, I'll need to install a camera for this computer. It doesn't have a camera lens, right? Yes, I'll buy it. Zheng Yujie was behind him. She dug out an external camera from a few boxes she brought with her when she first arrived. Okay, I'll make one for you now. Fat Dragon sat in front of the computer and started coding again. This Kybird, the design system, doesn't even provide a video player, so I have to do it. Sigh. Fat Dragon obviously didn't write a video player software on the spot. Although he was very good, he couldn't do something that a team of people couldn't do in a few months. Fat Dragon directly hacked the video player in his phone, then copied and pasted the code. Then, he slightly modified some of the core parts to match the current terminal. After all, the Comet system was born out of the Android system, so Fat Dragon only spent a little more than an hour to complete the copying work. Poplar Fruit and the rest were watching with interest at first, but after a few minutes, even the old-fashioned Xiong Kahoot couldn't be bothered to look. Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie also came to the outside of the school to chat. Poplar Fruit, I have an idea. Zheng Yujie leaned against the wooden railing and watched Kiki playing with her friends outside the school with Poplar Fruit. Hee hee, I don't understand what they're doing. Why are they laughing so happily? What do you think? Poplar Fruit was a little absent-minded at first. His thoughts were all on the little girl. When he came back to his senses, he turned his head and asked in confusion. I'm going to Guangdong province, not to play. Zheng Yujie bit her lower lip and said seriously. What? A trace of doubt flashed in Poplar Fruit's eyes. He doubted his ears. Come to Guangdong province? You mean long-term residence? What do you think? Zheng Yujie stared at Poplar Fruit's expression and asked. That's my only idea. I only got it 2 days ago. Why do you want to come to Guangdong province? Also, what about your job? Poplar Fruit's face was indescribable. It was neither happy nor unhappy, but his eyebrows were wrinkled. In fact, his last question was, You're not coming here because of me, are you? He had such a feeling, but he swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue and changed it to another one. Poplar Fruit wryly smiled in his heart. The uneasiness in his heart was getting more and more serious. Zheng Yujie bit her lip. Her crystal white teeth left a deep mark on her lips. I haven't thought about it yet. Maybe I'll resign and open my own publishing house. Poplar Fruit was startled. He said in surprise, Open a publishing house? That's not a small difficulty. Moreover, why do you want to open a publishing house in Guangdong province? Do you know my father? Zheng Yujie asked. Poplar Fruit shook his head in confusion and said, I don't know. I've seen your mother once. Ah, you've seen my mother? Zheng Yujie's face suddenly turned red. She was a little shy, but in an instant, she became angry. Hey, why didn't you tell me that you've seen my mother? Being angry was just a pretense, but Zheng Yujie's heart was still pounding. She was worried that her mother would say something to Poplar Fruit that shouldn't be said. After such a long time, Poplar Fruit felt that there was nothing to hide. He honestly told Zheng Yujie about his meeting with Deng Baoyan at the hotel that day. Of course, Poplar Fruit still selectively ignored some extreme scenes, such as the 2 bodyguards that Deng Baoyan brought along, and the conversation between the 2 of them that made their faces red. However, no matter how he looked at it, Poplar Fruit's first meeting with Zheng Yujie's mother was not a pleasant experience. Zheng Yujie pushed Poplar Fruit with some annoyance and said, You're really too straightforward. Why are you so serious with her? She made it clear that she wanted to make you angry. Back to Zheng Yujie's father, Zheng Yujie introduced her father's resume a little and then told Poplar Fruit, My father should take office next year, so if I start a business in Guangdong province, it will be easier. There are fewer constraints in all aspects compared to Beijing. Hearing that Zheng Mingsheng would become the leader of Guangdong province, Poplar Fruit was shocked. He knew that Zheng Yujie was the second generation of an official, but he never thought that her family background would be so strong. However, he was only shocked for a moment, and then he calmed down. Wasn't it just the provincial party secretary of Guangdong province? He was a commoner and an ordinary person who would take the academic route in the future. Not to mention the provincial party secretary, he probably wouldn't have any intersection with the head of the education department above him. However, as a friend, Poplar Fruit was still happy for Zheng Yujie. He also excitedly analyzed to Zheng Yujie. So it's like this. It's good that you want to come to Guangdong province to develop. Although Guangdong province's cultural heritage is not as good as Beijing, it has more vitality and opportunities. Many young people choose to start a business in Yangcheng and Shenzhen. However, opening a publishing house, do you want to reconsider this? A publishing house isn't something that can be opened in a short period of time. Zheng Yujie smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm not that arrogant. I just think that I know the operation of a publishing house best. If I choose to do a business, I still want to be in the publishing house industry. Oh, I don't want to start a business alone. You have to help me." "Of course," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "We have such a close relationship. If I don't help you, who will? It's just that I only know how to do translation. I'm not good at publishing books." The business of a publishing house is mainly the introduction of foreign books. Zheng Yujie said seriously, "The good books in China are basically divided up by those traditional publishing houses. If it's a foreign book, we might be able to dig out good treasures if we cooperate. The good foreign books are also snatched up," Poplar Fruit said with a headache. "For example, your current boss, Dongxin Publishing, and other foreign books, the commercial press, and so on. Do we have the confidence to get a piece of the cake from them?" Chapter 594. "Hey, you're killing me." Zheng Yujie pushed Poplar Fruit's chest with her shoulder and said, "I finally had the idea of being independent, and you gave me such a cruel reality. You're the one who didn't think it through." Poplar Fruit said helplessly, "Aren't we talking about it? Of course, I have to give you a heads up when I think about the risks. I can't let you hit a wall like a fool, right? You're the fool." Zheng Yujie kicked him and looked up. Her beautiful phoenix eyes stared at Poplar Fruit and said, "I don't care. You have to think of a new idea for me." "Well," Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, "Why don't you find a publishing house in Guangdong province and jump ship? With your experience, you should be able to find a good job." "No, I want to do it myself. I don't want to work for others." Zheng Yujie shook her head and said, Well, then you buy a publishing house." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "It doesn't have to be too good. Then you can be your own boss. There won't be much room for development." "How can that be?" Zheng Yujie said unhappily. "If I, Zheng Yujie, open a publishing house, I must do the best. How can I muddle through?" She suddenly realized the problem and angrily stretched out her hands to pull Yang Guo away. She didn't know when Yang Guo had sneaked a peek at Chi-Chi's big face, but she stomped her foot and said angrily, "Hey, Yang Guo, don't patronize me. Be serious." Poplar Fruit looked at Zheng Yujie. Although she still had the same playful expression, there was disappointment and grievance hidden in the depths of her eyes. He was shocked, and a thought flashed through his mind. Do I care too little about her? This thought, it was a very bad sign, but Poplar Fruit still found an excuse to deceive himself. Friends should care about each other. Zheng Yujie has done so many things for you. Now, when it's her turn to think about her own future, you don't care about her. How can you be a good friend? After being serious, Poplar Fruit suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He finally dared to look at Zheng Yujie's eyes. He rubbed his left thumb and middle finger and said with a smile, "I have a good idea." "Really?" Zheng Yujie looked at Poplar Fruit in surprise and asked. She was like my daughter, who was very gullible. Just now, she was angry because Poplar Fruit didn't care about her. Then, she was happy because Poplar Fruit snapped his fingers. However, this time, Poplar Fruit didn't disappoint her. He said with a smile, "Since we can't do well in the domestic book market and can't compete with the big publishers for high-quality books imported from abroad, Then we might as well go out and sell our domestic good books. You mean to translate our Chinese books into foreign languages? Zheng Yujie asked in surprise. Can this work? Isn't it more difficult? Zheng Yujie was right. Foreign language books were pouring into the country in waves, and there were even quite a number of them on the bestseller list. However, the sales of Chinese books overseas were like a quagmire, and it was difficult to move an inch. Asia was relatively optimistic. Southview, which was next to it, belonged to the Han cultural circle, and their thinking was relatively similar to the Chinese people. In addition, their cultural industry was relatively backward, so Chinese books even occupied half of the new book market in recent years. South Korea, Malaysia, and Singapore were also the main export countries. However, in Europe and the United States, because of the different cultural background, it was difficult for readers to feel the beauty of the Chinese narrative style. Very few Chinese books were popular in the West. For example, teacher Mo Yin, who Poplar Fruit worked with before, his works were very popular in France. That was already a rare success story. Of course, teacher Mo Yin's success was not only because his writing style was more in line with the thinking of Western readers, but also because his French translator was more reliable. Of course, the opening of the movie also made some excellent Chinese works sell well overseas. The most recent example was A.I. Me's Hawthorne Tree Love. Although it was a work that came back to China from overseas Chinese circles, it was originally published in Chinese. Because director Zhang's movie became an instant hit, this book has been introduced to 15 countries. In fact, after the translation of this book was published in Ghana, it quickly squeezed into the list of bestsellers. Other than that, there was nothing else. However, Poplar Fruit wasn't as worried as Zheng Yujie. He smiled confidently and said, "It's because this path is so difficult that very few people take it that we have a better chance of success. Did you forget? The man in front of you can't only translate foreign books into Chinese." Zheng Yujie obviously knew what Poplar Fruit meant. Poplar Fruit's translation ability had been recognized. His translation of the Swedish version of Life and Death Fatigue a few months ago already proved his ability. However, Zheng Yujie still didn't feel optimistic. I know, but didn't you say it yourself? Our way of thinking is different from foreign people. Even if the books are readable, what if they still don't like it? Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "I'm talking about traditional literature. It's really difficult for our traditional literature to go out. It can't be helped." At that time, the literary circle was relatively closed. Even now, we find the books difficult to understand, let alone foreigners. But it's different after the 21st century. Poplar Fruit said, "Our generation watches American dramas, American blockbusters, and even Western games. We're not so conservative. Then, look at the works written by our generation. Don't they have a lot of changes from the past?" Are you talking about Handsome Han and Wu Xiaoxi? Zheng Yujie's eyes lit up, but she sighed and said, "No, I remember that foreign publishers tried to sell their works, but they didn't become popular." Huh? Who said I was talking about them? Poplar Fruit laughed. "I'm talking about online novels." Online novels? Zheng Yujie was confused by Poplar Fruit. "Yes, we want to promote the best online novels in our country, especially fantasy and Xinsha novels." Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up and said, "There are Harry Potter and Twilight in foreign countries, but so do we. We have God Searchers, Mercenaries of the World, Ethereal Journey, Battle Through the Heavens, and so on. These novels are not literary works in the traditional sense, but it's a big blend of Western fantasy literature and our martial arts literature since the 21st century. There's magic, ancient martial arts, Xinsha, and innovative fighting spirit." Poplar Fruit became more and more excited as he spoke. He clenched his fist and said confidently, "If we can translate these excellent online novels to foreign countries, I believe there will be a very large audience. In fact, I believe that one day, Hollywood will be willing to invest a huge amount of money to make our fantasy works into a fantasy masterpiece like Lord of the Rings." Yang Guo waved his hand. His vision seemed to be flowing through the mountains and rivers of this world. Chapter 595. In front of Yang Guo, Zheng Yujie would do some unusual things because of the love in her heart. For example, she would kiss Yang Guo in front of everyone despite being quite conservative. She would use Yang Guo's support as an excuse. For example, she, who was usually strong enough to make all the men in the world kneel before her, would show a shy and girlish side. For example, just now, she was sad and angry because Yang Guo was perfunctory with her, but in the next moment, she was overjoyed because of Yang Guo's inspiration. But if you think of Zheng Yujie as a woman whose IQ will drop to 0 because of love, then you are gravely mistaken. She would lose herself because of popular fruit, but in the face of important things, her calmness would never change. Perhaps this was the good family education inherited by Zheng Mingsheng, who was about to become the governor of Guangdong province. Hearing popular fruit's domineering and vehement speech, it seemed that the magnificent prospects of his future translation of excellent online fantasy novels had appeared in front of her eyes. At this time, Zheng Yujie calmed down and seriously considered the feasibility of popular fruit's plan. It had to be said that the novels that were popular around the world in the past 10 years, except for the mystery series, Dan Brown's Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code, etc., seemed to be mostly Western magic or fantasy novels. Not to mention The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, which had been popular decades ago. Even if they had been published for decades, they were still selling well because of the movie adaptations. In terms of time, Rowling's Harry Potter at the end of the last century also didn't need much introduction. The adventure and love story of the magical teenagers deeply affected China in the 80s and 90s. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire had also been selling well for more than 10 years. Last year, it was made into a TV series by HBO in the United States, and it already had a large number of fans in China. Stephanie Meier's Twilight also didn't need any more praise. It was known as a magical masterpiece in the post-Harry Potter era. The romantic and poignant love story between a handsome vampire and a beautiful human girl in Aunt Meier's novel had changed the world's perception of vampires, which was previously unapproachable. In recent years, there was also Susan Collins's The Hunger Games trilogy swept all the major book awards in the United States and Europe since it was published in 2008. Even today, 4 years later, it was still the #1 Legion on the bestseller list. And this time, Yang Guo and Dongxin were preparing to secretly release Young P.I.'s Fantasy Drifting, which was also a legend in fantasy novels. If we were to compare our online novels with the best-selling fantasy and fantasy novels overseas, there would definitely be a certain gap. After all, our online novels have only been developing for more than 10 years, and the market atmosphere is also not the same as that of the past. However, in terms of imagination, Zheng Yujie felt that popular fruit's words made sense. Our online novels didn't fall behind. There were Eastern celestial heroes and Buddhas, and Western magic, knights, gods, and all kinds of sci-fi mechas and otherworldly continents. In just 10 years of development, the entire online novel was as bright as the stars and as gorgeous as the summer flowers. But here came the problem. Zheng Yujie frowned. Her left hand supported her right hand, and her right hand supported her chin. She asked, "Poplar fruit, this is a good idea. If it succeeds, we, as the first person to eat the crab, may be able to quickly seize the biggest piece of the cake. But have you thought about it? Where do we get the channels to sell our works? In the past, if we want to sell our works in China, we usually have to sign a separate agreement with foreign booksellers. Like Random House, these established booksellers are the first choice of authors. In the past, some large publishing groups in China did business research and wanted to merge with foreign publishing houses as our springboard, but they didn't succeed." Zheng Yujie said with some depression, "Of course, those big publishing houses in Dongxin have some channels to use, but do you think they are willing to work for others? This would be a very difficult problem. Even the publishing groups controlled by the state would hesitate." Poplar Fruit was not the only one who had the idea to sell Chinese books abroad. The country had this idea a few years ago. Most of the translators they gathered might not be as good as Yang Guo, but they were all successful seniors. Even if they were not as good as her, they would not be too far behind. But after a few years, they were still stuck at the same spot. It could be seen how difficult it was to achieve this. However, at this time, Poplar Fruit was working hard. His brain was working crazily. As early as when Zheng Yujie frowned and asked this question, he found the answer in an unremarkable little article in his memory. Yes, we have channels. Poplar Fruit punched his right fist on his left palm and said confidently, and it is a very, very big channel. What? Zheng Yujie asked in confusion. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, Create SPAC, translated as Amazon International Library. You will understand from the name that it is a publishing company under Amazon. However, unlike Amazon itself, it is engaged in the publishing of paperback books and electronic books. This was an independent publishing platform. Unlike traditional publishers, it did not do what publishers should do, but only build a sales platform for authors to sell directly to readers. To make a very vivid analogy, if publishers were to be compared to large supermarkets, they would collect the products, works, produced by many companies to sell to individual readers or bookstores. Then Amazon International Library would be the current popular Taobao in China. Whether you were a manufacturer or an individual businessman who wanted to open his own store to sell things, you could directly skip the supermarket link and sell your products directly on this platform. Therefore, no matter if you were a famous writer or a nobody, as long as you registered an account, you would be able to sell your works. Of course, whether it sold well or not, then it would really depend on the quality of the work. In reality, this library is only available to citizens of 12 countries, and among them, it does not include our country. Well, here, for the sake of the plot, let's just assume that our country is included. When it was sold, it could not only sell physical books. The platform would help to print and ship them. It could also sell electronic books, which could be read on Kindle devices or mobile devices with Kindle app installed. More importantly, it was not only Amazon, but also almost all mainstream online bookstores, such as Amazon Z, Electronic Harbor, eBay, JD.com, Barnes & Noble, etc., would accept the sales. In this way, as long as the book was good, there was no need to worry about its sales. How did Poplar Fruit know about this? He himself often bought books from this place. There were many foreign language books, especially small languages, that could not be bought in bookstores. Poplar Fruit searched for a long time and finally found them here. It showed that the stock was huge. Chapter 596. Wait a minute, Zheng Yujie said, in surprise. Without the middleman, the author's income must be greatly improved, right? Zheng Yujie had been a deputy editor for several years. She naturally knew the tricks of the publishing house. After hearing Poplar Fruit's introduction, Zheng Yujie immediately grasped the key point. Poplar Fruit nodded and said, yes, the author could get 35% of the sales, but since 2 years ago, this ratio has increased to 70%. Was 70% high? There was no need to compare. As long as one had a little common sense, they would know that 70% was a terrifying attraction to the author. Zheng Yujie was even more aware that, let alone the harsher domestic publishing houses, some books were bought without royalties, and even if they were, it would only be 6% to 10%. Through large-form publishers, the royalties an author could get were only 17%. Not everyone would be able to obtain 5% of the gold coins. It could be foreseen that such a high revenue model of 70% would be a huge blow to the traditional publishers. Zheng Yujie asked doubtfully, if there's really such a good platform, then it has broken the original market business model. There will definitely be traditional publishers who will unite to boycott it. How can they let it develop? Poplar Fruit was not very clear about this problem. After all, he only knew about the existence of this platform from the side. As for the hidden business struggle behind it, Poplar Fruit had not read about it. Of course, he was not interested in getting to the bottom of it before. Zheng Yujie could only speculate on her own. There may be two situations. First, this platform is too strong. Amazon is already an online sales channel that many publishers can't give up. They can't kill 1,000 of the enemy and lose 800 of their own to fight with Amazon. Second, this platform is not a big enough threat to the traditional publishers. Unless it is a talented author, he can directly publish a logical and smooth book without the supervision and sorting out of the publisher. There was once a foreign author who said in his book, "The more frequently a writer writes, the better he can write. But if the more we write, the more we don't realize that is bad, then how can we improve?" What was the role of an editor? It was to carefully read the author's work and then give professional suggestions. This way, the final published work could not be criticized and the author could improve from the constant revision. A book that was completely self-published was likely to have a lot of mistakes and shortcomings. As a reader, of course, they would be willing to buy a good book. A book that was reviewed by a mature publisher would naturally be their first choice. Poplar Fruit nodded and said, "It could also be both. Since the threat is not big enough, there is no need to worry too much and fight to the death." "Hey, don't imitate me." Zheng Yujie patted Yang arm and pouted. Zheng Yujie was not a person who cared about these small details. Quarreling with Poplar Fruit was just a performance of joy and happiness. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "There are so many problems. Then is my idea just an armchair strategist?" It seemed that the self-publishing route would not work. "Who said that?" Zheng Yujie smiled and hugged Poplar Fruit's arm. She looked at Poplar Fruit sweetly and said, "On the contrary, your idea is very feasible, and maybe we can rewrite the history of the domestic publishing industry." "What do you mean?" Poplar Fruit was a little confused. "Didn't you say that self-publishing is not as good as traditional publishers?" "Are we self-publishing?" Zheng Yujie asked. "Did you forget what we were going to do in the beginning? Open a publishing house." Poplar Fruit felt that his action with Zheng Yujie was a little too intimate. He blushed and pulled his arm out of the amazingly elastic two peaks. "Yes." Zheng Yujie did not care about Poplar Fruit's little action at this time. She smiled brightly and said, "We are traditional publishers, but since we don't have a better choice, why don't we break the rules and go the semi-self-publishing route?" "You mean?" Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up. Yes, Zheng Yujie wanted to use the identity of a publishing house to publish her own books through the self-publishing channel. In fact, Poplar Fruit had the same idea at first, but he was confused by the two models of self-publishing and traditional publishing that Zheng Yujie had mentioned. After all, he was not a professional in the publishing industry. What kind of business model was this? To give a very simple example, Zheng Yujie opened a publishing house, which also had an editorial department to review and proofread manuscripts, a technical department to typesetting, layout, and cover design, and other technical departments to handle some of the applications for publication, batch numbers, and other miscellaneous departments. However, the final printing, communication channels, and other parts could be omitted because they were all directly outsourced to Amazon International Library. In this way, Zheng Yujie's publishing house could save a lot of work. While streamlining the scale, it could also ensure the quality of the published books. This was something that pure self-publishing could not compare with. But don't be happy so early. Zheng Yujie poured cold water on Poplar Fruit, who was so naive that his blood was boiling. Now, there are still two problems that we need to consider. First of all, how can we sell our books and not let our publishing house suffer a loss? Since it was a self-publishing platform, as mentioned before, the books on it were a mix of good and bad. It was very difficult to stand out from the vast number of works that were as good as the starry sky. Of course, there were also successful examples. The most representative was Amanda Hawkins. Amanda Hawkins. This Hawkins was, of course, not the godlike physicist Hawkins. Amanda Hawkins? Hawking, a young girl from the 80s in the United States, was like an inspirational story. In the beginning, she could only rely on ordinary service work, similar to community service, to support her dream of writing. However, she was rejected by the publishing house many times. Then, in 2010, she self-published 9 ebooks, including Superpower Tribe, through Amazon International Library. In just a year, millions of copies were sold. Among them, the Superpower Tribe series was the best. It was even called a shocking work that combined the strengths of Twilight and The Princess Diaries. The movie rights were also sold last year, and the script was written by the screenwriter of District 9. Speaking of which, Zheng Yujie also knew about the Superpower Tribe trilogy. Dongxin did not manage to snatch the translation work from their old enemy, Yilin Publishing House. Otherwise, Zheng Yujie could have helped Poplar Fruit get the translation work for the trilogy. Chapter 597. Even if there were no lack of successful examples, how many glittering gold would still be drowned in the dirty sand? Even if Poplar Fruit was confident that he could translate a superior translation that was not inferior to the original work, who could guarantee that these translations would be dug out by readers from so many self-published works? This was only one of the problems that needed to be considered. Secondly, you have to know that the profits of traditional publishers are relatively high. They give authors a low royalty rate, and the sales of a good book after their operation are also very high. Even if we make money, we will definitely not earn as much as these publishers who have their own channels, Zheng Yujie said worriedly. If we make a certain achievement through this platform and become the first to eat crabs, those traditional publishers will definitely swarm in if they see the profit. At that time, the results that we have worked so hard to achieve will become a wedding dress for others. Zheng Yujie shook her head and said, "There is no lack of examples of this in the country and abroad." Zheng Yujie considered things more comprehensively, and these were all things that Poplar Fruit could not think of. Thinking of this, Poplar Fruit also fell silent. His brain was spinning rapidly, thinking of solution. Zheng Yujie suddenly laughed. She changed to a relaxed tone and said, "Okay, don't think about it. Look at your sad face. Actually, it's not that we can't do it. If everything had to be planned out at every step, we would have to stay in the plan forever. Only by bravely taking the first step can we have hope of success. Actually, your idea is already very good. Let's give it a try. Whether it succeeds or not, it will be a good experience." Zheng Yujie reached out and shook hands with Poplar Fruit, as if she had met her dearest comrade in a revolutionary war. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "You have the mentality to do big things. However, I actually thought of something just now. Although the first problem is related to operations, and I don't understand it very well, maybe I can give you a suggestion for the second problem." "Oh, what is it?" Zheng Yujie blinked her red phoenix eyes, and a look of surprise appeared on her pretty face. Poplar Fruit had given her enough surprises today. In the beginning, she had only brought up the idea of leaving Beijing. Even if she forced Poplar Fruit to give her an idea, it was just a joke with Poplar Fruit. However, she didn't expect that Poplar Fruit would really think of a way that no one had thought of before. She didn't think that a bookworm like Poplar Fruit would come up with a good solution for the company's management. However, Poplar Fruit still surprised her. "It's impossible to swallow the entire book export pie." Poplar Fruit said seriously, "I don't think even a big publishing group like Dongxin would dare to make such a big demand. But maybe we can try to seize as many foreign language copyrights of high-quality online novels as possible in the early stages, when no one is optimistic about them." "I understand." Zheng Yujie nodded. She definitely had thought of the key points of these operations without Poplar Fruit's reminder. In the middle and later stages, we can retain those outstanding translators. Poplar Fruit looked at the problem from his own point of view. "How? Sign those long-term contracts with them?" Zheng Yujie asked with some disappointment. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "No, it's useless to sign those long-term contracts. Talented translators won't just hand themselves over to a publishing house, and those who are willing to sign long-term contracts are the translators with average abilities. If they're the only ones, what's the point?" Zheng Yujie also knew that long-term contracts were useless. She knew it from Dongxin. Those who signed contracts with Dongxin were all young translators with little achievements. Dongxin didn't dare to use long-term contracts with real translation masters at all. For example, Professor Luo Lin translated for Dongxin in the capacity of collaborators. Dongxin had to be careful, for fear of making these masters unhappy if they didn't handle it properly. Poplar Fruit was the same. Dongxin once saw the potential of Poplar Fruit and wanted to sign Poplar Fruit, but Zheng Yujie was rejected when she mentioned it to Poplar Fruit. But Dongxin didn't dare to fall out with Poplar Fruit. Perhaps if Zheng Yujie wasn't in the middle, Dongxin would think that Poplar Fruit was too arrogant, but they definitely didn't dare to fall out with Poplar Fruit. After all, Poplar Fruit showed that his strength was not inferior to domestic translation masters at a young age. If they offended Poplar Fruit now, wouldn't they suffer the revenge of a master for decades to come? If it was only Poplar Fruit alone, it would be fine. But who knew how many translators Poplar Fruit's future students would be? Poplar Fruit finally said his thoughts. If we want to do it in the long run, then our publishing house must give the translators an appropriate commission. Commission? Isn't that unreasonable? Zheng Yuji exclaimed. From the last century to this century, the relationship between publishers and translators was very subtle. But one thing was certain: the importance of translators was far lower than the importance of the original author. Translators not only had a low status, but the remuneration they received couldn't be compared with the profits of publishers. As mentioned earlier, domestic translators and foreign translators were treated differently. Domestic translators were paid according to the number of words in a book, and the translator's name was hidden in a secret place in the final published book. In foreign countries, translators could get a commission, and the translator's name on the translated book was on the same level as the original author. Even if the translator's name was not as good as the original author's, it could still be placed in a prominent position on the cover of the book. What Poplar Fruit wanted to say was to break the norm and improve the status and treatment of translators. Our book export is different from the book import. Translators play a very important role in it. Speaking of English, as long as one had a certain foundation and good Chinese writing skills, he or she could translate English into Chinese. After all, it was not difficult to read English, and the translated language was his or her mother tongue. But not everyone who learned English could translate Chinese into English well. After all, the logic of English and Chinese was very different. It was very likely that the translated work would be awkward for foreigners. Translators and authors could enjoy the same commission. This was not only to increase the translator's income, but also to link the translator's income with the sales of his translated work. From another perspective, it was also an incentive for translators. Only by working hard to translate this book can I earn more money. Otherwise, my efforts will be more valuable. Looking for monthly votes, looking for recommendations. Greater than or equal to. Chapter 598. What Poplar Fruit said was only a suggestion. Zheng Yuji still needed to consider whether or not to implement it, and what kind of profit-sharing system would be between the publishing house, the author, and the translator. Zheng Yuji only had a preliminary idea. There was still a long time before she decided to resign and go south. At least, she would not resign before Poplar Fruit's translation of Young P.I.'s Fantasy Drifting was published. Unknowingly, the two of them had been chatting outside for a long time. Poplar Fruit and the others returned to the school to check on Fat Dragon's progress. Unexpectedly, as soon as they walked in, they found Fat Dragon in a video call with a man. The conversation was in full swing, but the jargon that came out of his mouth confused Poplar Fruit. Xiong Kahu, on the other hand, looked curiously behind Fat Dragon. The way he poked his head out and looked around repeatedly appeared in the camera. It was particularly funny. Isn't that Kai Simin? Zheng Yuji asked in surprise. Hearing Zheng Yuji's voice, Fat Dragon subconsciously closed the video chat interface. Poplar Fruit then saw that Fat Dragon was using Button's video chat. He didn't know if this guy had written a plugin that allowed Button, which originally had incomplete functions in the comment system, to be able to video chat. Hi, you guys are back. Fat Dragon waved at Poplar Fruit and the others nervously. That's right. You've already finished writing a program after taking a detour. So fast? Yangwo was more straightforward. He chuckled. Copying someone else's program. Of course it's fast, huh? Fat Dragon waved his hand proudly. No, Zheng Yuji wasn't fooled by Fat Dragon. She looked at Fat Dragon suspiciously and asked, Were you talking to Kai Simin just now? How do you know her? Who? Who do you know? Fat Dragon was terrible at lying. He even pretended not to know. This made Zheng Yuji feel that something was wrong. She walked past Fat Dragon and grabbed Fat Dragon's mouse. Fat Dragon was pushed back 2 steps by her. Zheng Yuji found Fat Dragon's chat interface and found Kai Simin's name. You said you didn't know her. Isn't this the case? Let me see. I just added him. That's not right. How did you get his QQ number? The fruit is for me. Fat Dragon lied through his teeth. Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and said, I don't even have his QQ. How can I give it to you? No, I accidentally saw his number on Guazi's phone, so I asked him. Ha ha. Fat Dragon said with a dry laugh. Nonsense. Zheng Yujie caught Fat Dragon's loophole. She said sternly, don't use Poplar Fruit as an excuse. He doesn't even have Kai Simin's contact information. Back then, Zheng Yujie was a tyrant in the circle of the second generation in the capital. When she was angry, her cold aura was as terrifying as a knife. Fat Dragon was so scared that his fat face turned pale. He sat paralyzed on the chair and didn't even dare to breathe. Poplar Fruit felt that Zheng Yujie's reaction was a bit too big. He scratched his head and went forward to pull Zheng Yujie and said, let's talk nicely. I'll ask him. When Poplar Fruit spoke, Zheng Yujie angrily moved aside. Poplar Fruit looked at Fat Dragon and frowned. He thought about it. In fact, he could roughly guess what was going on. Did you secretly look at Yujie's phone? Poplar Fruit asked. Or did you hack into her phone to find Kai Simin's contact information? Fat Dragon secretly looked at Zheng Yujie, but Zheng Yujie ignored him and stood aside angrily with her arms crossed. Poplar Fruit sighed and said, forget it. You don't have to answer me. I already know. Tell me, what's the point of you? I understand that you want to find Kai Simin. You're all technical nerds. Then tell me directly. It's not like I won't give it to you. If you do this, won't everyone hate you? Have you forgotten what happened in junior high? In junior high school, Fat Dragon liked a girl, but he was very shy and didn't dare to talk to her. So he secretly used his hacking skills to hack into the girl's QQ account and directly added himself to her friend list. Then, the two of them chatted while online. But one day, he let it slip. The girl angrily blocked him, and they never contacted each other again. This incident hurt Fat Dragon. Poplar Fruit, as his best buddy, persuaded him for 2 months. After that, Fat Dragon didn't do anything to the people around him. Apologized to Yujie. Hurry up. Poplar Fruit's voice was a bit strict. Poplar Fruit was younger than Fat Dragon by a year, and Fat Dragon was also married. However, Fat Dragon still listened to Poplar Fruit's words. This was because he cherished such a good buddy from the bottom of his heart. I'm sorry. Fat Dragon stood up and walked in front of Zheng Yujie. He bowed deeply and said, Poplar Fruit also persuaded from the side. Yujie, let's just forget about this. Fat Dragon didn't mean any harm. He won't do it again. I'll forget about it this time. Zheng Yujie's face was a bit better. In fact, she was still a bit uncomfortable. If it wasn't for Poplar Fruit, who knows what kind of reaction she would have had. Don't forget, no matter how kind the second generation of officials were, they were still the second generation of officials. Their means of revenge would be more severe than ordinary people's. Zheng Yujie found an excuse to go back and rest. Poplar Fruit knew that the easing of their relationship wasn't something that could be restored in a short period of time. He laughed as he grabbed Kiki, who couldn't stop playing, and ordered her to go back with Zheng Yujie to take a nap. He could only hope that Kiki would be able to make Zheng Yujie a bit happier. When they returned to school, Poplar Fruit found Fat Dragon sitting on a chair like an obedient child listening to Xiong Kahu's lecture. Although Xiong Kahu didn't quite understand how Fat Dragon had managed to sneak a peek at Zheng Yujie's phone, he knew that it wasn't right to secretly touch a friend's things. Therefore, after Poplar Fruit left, he took over to tug on Fat Dragon's ear and lectured him. Xiong Kahu didn't read many books, but he was still able to memorize the teachings of his ancestors. Furthermore, he quoted from his own past experiences in his narration. The great principle of not betraying a brother's friendship was enough to make one's blood boil with excitement. Fat Dragon had an infatuated look on his face. He probably thought that it was a wuxia novel again. Poplar Fruit stood at the door and watched for a while. He noticed a strange situation. It seemed like the relationship between Master and Fat Dragon had improved a lot. Thinking back to when the two of them first met, they were really like fire and water. Master wanted to kill him, and Fat Dragon's pants were still half drooping. Since when did Master stop looking at Fat Dragon with suspicion and disgust? One old and one young. Well, it should be said that one old and one fat. It was really a little interesting. Chapter 599. With Poplar Fruit and Fat Dragon around, Xiongkahu went out for a stroll after chatting for a while. The old man didn't seem to have the habit of taking an afternoon nap. When he was free, he would walk around to see if the kids in the stockade had caused a ruckus during his absence. Poplar Fruit knew that Fat Dragon wasn't a bad person, so he didn't say anything else. After all, people also had dignity. If the same thing was brought up again and again, he would also feel impatient. However, Fat Dragon brought up the matter again. At that time, Yangguo was still telling him about the teaching software she was going to use. QQ's video chat isn't enough. I need a lot of functions. First, and most importantly, we need to be able to split the screen so that the kids can see me on one side, and they can see the PowerPoint on the computer on the other side, right? Just like a real class. I know that our display screen doesn't look big enough, and it might not be able to meet the requirements of split screens. Actually, we also bought a projector this time. You can see how we can combine the two organically. How about we use the projector to play the image of my lecture? Then we can play the PowerPoint or other courseware on the display screen in front of the kids. Poplar Fruit. Fat Dragon was a little absent-minded. He looked at Poplar Fruit's expression and hesitated to speak. What's wrong? Poplar Fruit asked strangely. If there's anything, just say it. It's not like you to hesitate. Fat Dragon clenched his teeth and said, Fruit, what happened just now? Poplar Fruit waved his hand and smiled. All right, let's not talk about the past. Let it go. No, that's not what I meant. Fat Dragon said anxiously. I hacked into Zheng Yujia's phone. I really didn't want to secretly get the rookie's phone number. I just couldn't say it in front of her. Didn't you want to secretly get Kai Simin's phone number? But you still did. Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and said, No matter why you did it, no matter how you did it, you shouldn't have done it. I did it because of you. Fat Dragon said anxiously, Hey, you don't understand. I'm just afraid that you'll be deceived by this woman. Wait a minute. Poplar Fruit said with a frown. What do you mean? I'm confused. What do you mean by for me? Fat Dragon said in a rare, serious tone. When I first met Zheng Yujia, do you know what I was thinking? You did. Poplar Fruit said speechlessly. Didn't you say she was a great beauty? Yeah, she's a beauty, and her family is rich and powerful. What about you? Other than being a little handsome, your family background is average, and you already have a child. Tell me, Poplar Fruit, what did you do to make such an excellent girl throw herself at you? Fat Dragon said this, not showing any jealousy, but with a face full of sincerity. Don't use the word throw herself at me, okay? She and I are just ordinary friends. Poplar Fruit said this, even though he felt that it was a little against his will. TSK, you're so stubborn. She chased you all the way to the wilderness. Isn't that throwing herself at you? Fat Dragon shook his head and said, Anyway, I think it's a little unusual. So you hacked into her phone? Poplar Fruit wiped his cold sweat and looked at him speechlessly. Whether you believe or not, I just wanted to protect you. I was afraid that you'd be deceived by Zheng Yujia. Fat Dragon said very seriously. What's there to deceive? I'm just a poor boy. Poplar Fruit said with a wave of his hand. You're poor? You're already a millionaire, and you're still poor? Fat Dragon punched Poplar Fruit and said angrily, As a brother, I have to keep a lookout for you. Otherwise, how can I explain to Sister Ping and Aunt Jean phone? Wait. Poplar Fruit looked at Fat Dragon suspiciously and said, Then, did you also hack into Fong Beibei's phone? Not hers, but I checked some of her information. That girl's background is very simple, so there's nothing to be suspicious about. Fat Dragon shook his head and said. Poplar Fruit reached out and pinched Fat Dragon's neck and said angrily, I don't care if you want to protect me, but I won't allow you to lay your hands on my friends. Do you understand? This is a matter of principle. Fat Dragon felt the sternness in Poplar Fruit's eyes. He quickly raised his hand and swore, I understand, I won't do it again, I swear. Poplar Fruit let him go. Fortunately, Fat Dragon didn't hack into Fong Beibei's phone, or else Poplar Fruit might really get angry. Do you know what I saw in Zheng Yujia's phone? Fat Dragon looked at Poplar Fruit strangely and said with a smile, "Stop." Poplar Fruit frowned. He really wanted to slap this guy to death and said, "I don't know and I don't want to know." Fat Dragon was blocked by Poplar Fruit and almost choked. This feeling of wanting to say something but not being able to say was really depressing. He opened his mouth, but Poplar Fruit actually covered his ears and said angrily, "Hey, I said you're not allowed to say it." Fat Dragon didn't give up and said, "No, you must be very curious. Do you know what kind of background her family has?" Poplar Fruit was really angry this time. He lifted Fat Dragon from the chair, and the 200-pound Fat Dragon couldn't resist at all. He was directly pressed against the wall by Poplar Fruit. This cabinet, the style is too beautiful. Xiao Han is drunk, ha." Poplar Fruit was very serious this time. He stared at Fat Dragon's eyes and said, I don't want to hear it. Do you know why? Because I treat her as my good friend. No matter if she's good or bad, I'll tolerate it. Even if I can't tolerate it, I don't want you to tell me behind my back. This is the trust one have for my friends. Even if it's good? Fat Dragon asked timidly. No. Poplar Fruit was a little annoyed. He said, "Do you even understand human language?" Okay. Fat Dragon raised his hands in surrender and said, "I was wrong, I won't say it, okay?" Poplar Fruit put him down. However, Fat Dragon hesitated for a moment and couldn't help but say, "Poplar Fruit, don't be angry. I won't say anything else, but seeing that she forgave me, can you let me say something fair for her?" Poplar Fruit clenched his fists and finally loosened them. He sighed, turned his head to the side, and said, "Okay, say it. It's really fair." Fat Dragon was really going all out this time. He still wanted to say something against Poplar Fruit's anger. "Zheng Yujia is a good girl. She's sincere to you." Fat Dragon took a deep breath, looked at Poplar Fruit, and said sincerely, "I don't know what's going on between you and that little junior, but I'm sure that if you miss out on Zheng Yujia, you'll regret it." Chapter 600. It was already afternoon, and the aroma of tea lingered in the air. The white smoke that rose into the air carried a sense of longing, like people sitting quietly in silence. It was as if the simple wooden table had already become a world of its own. "It's time to go home." A cold but tactful voice broke the silence in the air. On the other side, the girl who only liked to wear plain clothes began to pull over her small bag. She tidied up the books that she had brought and gently put them into the bag. The girl's beautiful face was still as calm as before. However, compared to before, there was a trace of coldness that kept people away. This was perhaps the biggest change in Duan Xueqing over the past few days. Although her personality was still as taciturn as before, at least she would not deliberately ignore others. Duan Xueqing's progress had a lot to do with Pai Dinwan. In order to avoid her family's nagging, she sat alone in the tea house to read books. She had a man who was not annoying and did not nag her. Sometimes, when she saw his bright smile, her mood would be a little bit better. This seemed to have become a familiar scene that she experienced every day. In fact, Pai Dinwan did not come every day. Yesterday, he received an order to shoot a wedding dress outside. In his words, it was fortunate that this time he was only shooting by the lake in the suburbs. If he went abroad to shoot, he would not know how many days and nights he would be able to come back. Duan Xueqing did not see him yesterday. Although her expression did not change, she inexplicably felt a trace of disappointment in her heart. "Oh, time flies." Pai Dinwan stood up, twisted his waist, and bowed his head to Duan Xueqing with a smile. "My unscrupulous boss did not come back. He gave me an empty afternoon again." Pai Dinwan's wedding dress photography company was actually opened by Pai Dinwan and his friends. Pai Dinwan had a small share, while his friends had a large share. There were only 2 people in the whole company. Pai Dinwan was the chief and the only photographer. Even so, Pai Dinwan often did not have to go to work. Of course, the reason why it was so strange was that on one hand, Pai Dinwan's photography skills were good enough. On the other hand, it was because his friends were rich enough. Pai Dinwan's friends were all rich second generation. He was too lazy to run a company. The wedding dress photography company was set up by him on a whim. Because the company was opened on his family's property and the equipment was acquired from other bankrupt wedding dress photography companies. What he believed in was the business philosophy of don't open for half a year, but open for half a year. Usually, he would persuade Pai Din One to cherish his life and enjoy life in time, which meant that he should not accept small orders with small profits. Then he would invite his rich friends in his circle from time to time. Those rich young masters and young ladies were different from Duan Xueqing's family. Their families relied on real estate speculation to become rich. They did not care about small amounts of money at all. They did not care about spending millions of yuan for a romantic wedding photo shoot. By the way, do you have anything to do in the afternoon? Pai Din One lowered his head and asked Duan Xueqing. Looking at Duan Xueqing from top to bottom, the slightly raised bridge of her nose sat between the two curved long eyelashes. Her thin almond-shaped face was always charming, and her cold and icy skin was as delicate as jade. It seemed that no matter how one looked at it, this was a girl who made one's heart pound. Duan Xueqing raised her head and looked at Pai Din One in surprise. Her beautiful face, which had never revealed her inner fluctuations, was shocked by Pai Din One's sudden question. This silence lasted for a long time, until Pai Din One was a little discouraged. Duan Xueqing suddenly lowered her head and continued to pack her small bag. A pleasant voice, which was as light as a breeze, brought her answer. Nothing. If one did not pay attention, perhaps the words of Duan Xueqing would really disappear after being blown by the wind. However, Pai Din One was paying close attention to Duan Xueqing at this moment. Hearing her words, Pai Din One's thick eyebrows trembled slightly. He seemed to be bursting with joy, but he suppressed it. Do you like to look at photos? Pai Din One struck while the iron was hot and said, How about I take you to look at the wedding photos I took? Going out for a walk once in a while can also change your mood. To be honest, although Pai Din One and Duan Xueqing had been sitting face to face in this tea house for a long time, the two of them had very little conversation. At most, they would say goodbye to each other before leaving. Pai Din One would sometimes mention his schedule. That was all. Today, the two of them seemed to talk more than usual. After hearing Pai Din One's invitation, Duan Xueqing hesitated for a while before nodding and agreeing. Not daring to push his luck, Pai Din One finally gave Duan Xueqing his address. At noon, Duan Xueqing went home for lunch as usual. She even had a good afternoon nap. Pai Din One became the one who was restless. He didn't eat lunch, but went back to the tea house and began to clean the dust that had accumulated because he opened the door but didn't receive customers. These pieces of glass are dirty. There's so much dust. Pai Din One wiped the wedding photos that were hung on the wall for publicity. A few finger marks immediately appeared on the glass cover. He shook his head and quickly found a wet rag to wipe them. At around 1 o'clock, Pai Din One was really hungry, so he ordered takeout. However, if he ate in the tea house, even if it was very light Jiangnan cuisine, there would still be a smell left. Okay, I'll do my best. Pai Din One held the lunchbox and squatted on the curb outside the tea house to eat. I look like a migrant worker. Sigh. After cleaning up, Pai Din One returned to the tea house. At first, he sat upright on the sofa with his hands on his knees. He turned his head and looked around to see if there was anything wrong with the place. It's 2 o'clock. It's 2 o'clock. Pai Din One straightened his back. I'm a little sleepy. It's 2:30, 2:30. Pai Din One quivered, and some vague sleepiness disappeared. It's 3 o'clock. Pai Din One began to walk back and forth in the tea house. He couldn't sit down. Another half an hour passed. Pai Din One leaned against the front desk for decoration. His head was pillowed on top of it, and he looked at the white wall with melancholy. He sighed in his heart again and again. Ding-ling-ling, ding-ling-ling, that's not right. It's not a sigh. Pai Din One's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. He quickly stood up, rubbed his stiff cheeks, and looked out of the glass door. He saw an ancient bicycle wobbling on the greenbelt path, avoiding pedestrians. In fact, there were no pedestrians, no bicycles, and nothing else. All he could see were her thin and weak shoulders, her long hair that reached her waist, and her cold and melancholic face. She's here. Chapter 601. Here. One's face was filled with a happy smile. He walked out of the door and waved at Duan Xueqing. Under the scorching sun, Duan Xueqing only wore a small sun hat. When she got out of the car, above her slightly panting cherry lips, her small nose and forehead covered by her bangs were fine beads of sweat. Her delicate appearance made people want to hold her in their arms and wipe her tired sweat with a clean towel. This fool, why didn't Lu Yuan call me? He even rode here? Sigh, how stupid. This was One's monologue in his heart. He naturally didn't dare to be rude to a beautiful woman, especially Duan Xueqing, a girl who used coldness to cover up her thick defenses. Duan Xueqing nodded gently at him as a greeting. Then, she parked the car under the shade of a tree and locked it. Then, she carried her small bag and walked towards One. It was a hot summer day, and the inside of the wedding photography shop was another world. The turn-on air conditioner made the heat wave outside a thing of the past. However, Duan Xueqing wasn't used to the sudden change in temperature. As soon as she came in, she couldn't help but shiver. Is the temperature too low? One resisted the urge to take off his coat and put on Duan Xueqing. On the one hand, it seemed a little too rash to do so. On the other hand, One wasn't wearing a coat either. One found the remote control and increased the temperature of the air conditioner a little. With Duan Xueqing's personality, there was no need to be polite between the two of them. Before One could even introduce her, Duan Xueqing walked to the small corridor where the wedding photos were displayed and looked at them. This was taken a while ago. Yuan followed behind Duan Xueqing and said with a smile, some of them were taken in 2010, and these few were taken at the beginning of 2011. The ones that came after that weren't hung up. My boss was too lazy. One, you're not any better, are you? One's photography skills were really good. His composition was very interesting. It was not like those photo studios where the couple stood in front of the background. It seemed that every photo had a story of the lovers. This was taken in the Heward vast grassland. One saw Duan Xueqing's eyes move to a photo, and she was reluctant to look away, so he introduced it with a smile. Although it was a grassland, the background of the photo was not an endless sea of grass. It should be a stream in the grassland. A herd of horses, although they were only reared by the herdsman. If there was no close-up, the difference could not be seen, were pacing by the stream. The newlyweds were sitting on the back of a tall white horse at the moment. The bride, who was also wearing a white wedding dress, opened her veiled arms and leaned into her husband's arms with a sweet and intoxicated expression. This set of classic Titanic poses was sublimated in another scene. The gentle light in the foreground and the background that was not blurry, the grassland, the stream, and the horses set off the romance. Yuan's clever choice of angle highlighted the beauty of the bride, and also concealed the groom's appearance that was not very eye-catching even if he had put on makeup. One pointed at the photo and smiled slightly proudly. This photo is also a milestone. Originally, many customers did not believe in my skills. Since the 5th month of the opening, when I went to the grassland to take this photo, no one has questioned me anymore. To be precise, in the circle of One's friends, many people knew One because of this photo. Later, One's friends decided to do a big deal, who asked a large portion of the rich to be ugly. Although they weren't ugly, they weren't that good either. They looked for other wedding dress companies to take the photo, but the photo was simply Beauty and the Beast, which made them feel happy. I'll show you the photo albums later. They're all good photos that I have collected. I have never shown them to anyone else. One walked past Duan Xueqing into the lounge inside. That photo is a milestone, but it is not a masterpiece. There are many photos taken later that are better than this one. One was wearing a blue and white striped shirt, and the sleeves were rolled up to the elbows. When he was talking about the photography that he was good at, One bloomed with indescribable confidence. Looking at his excited look at the moment, It was completely different from the calm look he had when he was drinking tea with Duan Shueching in the tea house. However, it seemed to be more charming this way. In fact, Duan Shueching did not say a word when she came into the shop. Her eyes wandered between the photo and Pai Din Wan from time to time. Although she didn't say anything, she didn't have the cold aura of 1,000 miles away from her body. Her bright and beautiful eyes revealed an undetectable fluctuation. This photo was taken in Nihon country last March. The theme is cherry blossoms. Many customers like this kind of romance. This year, there are 2 orders with this theme. Well, this one's also good, right? It was a snow scene. At that time, it was cold and the bride wore little. However, it was to highlight this kind of love. There's also this one. It was taken at the bottom of the sea. The equipment was borrowed. This is the most challenging photo I've ever taken. At that time, I took it over and over again. It took me 3 days to get this photo that I'm satisfied with. It is definitely much worse than this one in the Maldives. However, this difficult process is still memorable, haha. Duan Shueching sat quietly next to Pai Din Wan. While looking through Pai Din Wan's collection of works, she listened to the story behind each romantic or warm wedding photo. She said very little. At most, she took the initiative to ask, "What about this one?" or agreed with a hum. The 2 were quite close. Pai Din Wan could smell the delicate fragrance of her hair. He could not help but feel a little nostalgic and intoxicated. For people who were getting married, wedding photos symbolized the purity and romance of love. It also symbolized the beginning and expectation of marriage. However, for Duan Shueching, she would not think so much about the profound meaning. However, it was really beautiful, so she could not help but look at it again and again. Perhaps it was also a dream. Time passed too quickly. Duan Shueching only did it for 2 hours before she self-disciplined cycled home. She did not miss it too much, nor did she promise to go on another date. She left Pai Din Wan alone in the shop to reminisce. Buzz buzz. His phone rang. Pai Din Wan sat on the sofa. He took a look at it and frowned slightly. Hello. I made some progress. Why are you rushing me? Let me tell you, you can't rush this. This girl is not ordinary. Although she doesn't talk, she has a high IQ. It took me half a month to get close to her. You can't treat her like those idiots in the past, right? Okay, I got it. I will be faster. Give me 3 months. 2 months should be enough, right? Ciao. Let me tell you, it really can't be faster. Either you believe me, or you get someone else. That's it, bye. With a parabola in the air, the phone flew to another sofa with a sigh of annoyance. It bounced up and fell. Chapter 602. It was as if nothing had happened. In the afternoon, Fat Dragon continued to hang out with Kai Si-min, his soulmate whom he had finally found. Both of them were technically obsessed, but Fat Dragon was slightly more inclined towards writing programs, while Kai Si-min was slightly more inclined toward hardware. However, both of them were unwilling to admit defeat in their weakness, so they spent the whole afternoon arguing. Zheng Yujie was unhappy at noon. Although she had forgiven Fat Dragon, she still felt a little uncomfortable. She simply went for a walk with Kiki, who had just woken up in the afternoon. She also brought along Gold, who could only tuck its tail between its legs in the Hmong stockade village. Poplar Fruit acted as if nothing had happened. He looked at Fat Dragon's progress for a while, and then looked at his daughter's innocent, smiling face. Then, he carried the 2 Meow Dao that were half a person's height and looked for a piece of wood to compete with. Tomorrow was Zheng Yujie's birthday. Logically speaking, he would celebrate it with Zheng Yujie tonight. However, with Poplar Fruit skill, he might not be able to carve a cute rabbit even if he was given another week. Now, the piece of wood in his hand was like that. Its long ears had fallen off twice, but he still persevered to fix the ears. As a result, the rabbit's head became a human shape. There was no other way. Zheng Yujie's birthday gift could only be made up later. Although he had told Zheng Yujie before, and the girl had said that she did not care, he had to admit that it was a pity. However, after Fat Dragon's words, did Poplar Fruit really not change? Yang's natural expression was just a facade he was putting on. Fatty Dragon's words had set off waves in his heart. Even when he was carving wood with a knife, he wasn't calm. He almost cut his own hand several times. This was rare for Yanghua, who could control all the muscles in his body. If Fat Dragon could see Poplar Fruit's inner world, or hear his inner monologue, then Fat Dragon would definitely hit his head against the wall. He would even have the thought of dying. Yes, Poplar Fruit did not fall in love with someone else because of Fat Dragon's words. This guy with low EQ even dug himself into a dead end. Zheng Yujie was so good to him that it was hard to find another girl who would be willing to sacrifice herself for Poplar Fruit. However, this cannot be. In recent days, the uneasiness in Poplar Fruit's heart finally broke out. Poplar Fruit's EQ was not high, but he was very clear about what he wanted. When Lu Yunran was still Poplar Fruit's girlfriend, Poplar Fruit loved Lu Yunran deeply. Duan Xueqing, a girl who was several times prettier than Lu Yunran, quietly became his confidant for 4 years. Poplar Fruit still only treated her as a junior who needed to be taken care of. If Kiki's incident had not happened, Poplar Fruit and Lu Yunran would have been an ordinary love story. With their characters, it would not be a problem for them to live a long life without illness or pain. However, Wu Yu accidentally broke in and changed Poplar Fruit's life. However, a leopard could not change its spots. Even after Poplar Fruit had a daughter, his personality was still so fucked up. Yes, Xiao Han admitted that it was Xiao Han's initial setting that was fucked up. Until now, Poplar Fruit still clearly understood what he pursued in love. That's right, he wasn't purely pursuing love anymore. As a father, he had to shoulder the responsibility of a father. Love and family could only complement each other. They couldn't become a conflict because Chi-Chi couldn't afford to wait. Poplar Fruit's initial impression of Fang Beibei and Zheng Yujie were actually more or less the same. Fang Beibei was cute, kind, and beautiful like a fairy. She was the pure dream of all boys. Guangguan Jujio is in the river continent. A gentle and graceful lady is a gentleman's dream. Poplar Fruit was the same. When he saw Fang Beibei by the lake, his heart was moved. When Zheng Yujie first appeared, she had the appearance of a domineering older sister. She only lacked a whip to complete the transformation of a queen. Zheng Yujie, who was both beautiful and intelligent, had an ambiguous relationship with Poplar Fruit from the beginning. It would be a lie to say that Poplar Fruit was not moved. After all, Poplar Fruit was also a man. The change in his feelings for Fang Beibei happened when Poplar Fruit was tutoring Fang Beibei. Originally, it was just a feeling of love and could not help but want to interact more. However, because Fang Beibei was sincerely good to Kiki, and because Fang Beibei and Poplar Fruit spent a happy time together in the teacher's dormitory, Poplar Fruit truly understood his own heart. It was not just a feeling of love, it had turned into love. Before this, it was not impossible for Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie to be together. This possibility was even greater than Poplar Fruit and Fang Beibei. It was a pity that Zheng Yujie had a younger brother who cheated his sister. Zheng Taiming successfully made Poplar Fruit mistakenly think that Zheng Yujie already had a fiancé, and Poplar Fruit wanted to build a complete family for Kiki, a family that was not so unstable. Therefore, the bud that had not yet sprouted was killed by Zheng Taiming's lie. When Zheng Yujie explained it clearly, it was already a bit too late. At that time, Poplar Fruit had already recognized Fang Beibei's existence. Poplar Fruit and Fang Beibei were only left with a confession. Zheng Yujie's efforts, such as rushing to confess and forcefully kissing Poplar Fruit, were not useless. However, Poplar Fruit thought about it carefully and realized that his identity, not his birth, was an unmarried father. There was a huge conflict with Zheng Yujie's family. In addition, Poplar Fruit's accumulated guilt towards Zheng Yujie in his heart made Poplar Fruit rationally choose not to go deeper. Now, Poplar Fruit himself had walked into a dead end. Fat Dragon's words woke him up from his dream. He was surprised to find that Zheng Yujie's love for him was not something that he could stop at will, and he seemed to like the feeling of being loved a little. Is he sure he was not secretly happy? This was not right. He and Fang Beibei were in the last step of becoming lovers, the so-called observation period that Fong Beibei mentioned. How could he fall in love with another woman? Poplar Fruit had never thought about having a dragon and two phoenixes or giving up on both his left and right hands. The two women accepted it all. That was a web novel, but Yang Guo was facing reality. No one knew about Poplar Fruit's dilemma, and he walked to the other extreme in this dilemma. He could not go on like this. If Fat Dragon knew that he had made Poplar Fruit think it through, and that he was preparing to gradually draw a line between men and women with Zheng Yujie to ensure that friends could not cross the line, he would really apologize with his life. Who asked him to be so self-righteous? Of course, Poplar Fruit did not immediately draw a line. He would take note of Zheng Yujie's feelings. Because, although it was impossible to be lovers, Poplar Fruit still cherished Zheng Yujie's existence as a friend. P.S. This chapter is an explanation. I see that many readers don't like Fong Beibei. Little Han wants to say that it's because they don't understand Fong Beibei. I haven't been paying enough attention to her recently. After all, Little Han's skills are not enough. PS2. Recently, I read a good book, The Age of Literature and Art. Many readers might have read it, but Xiao Han would still recommend it here. It is really a good book. Although it is a rebirth, it is very realistic. It is not overly YY and will turn white in sleep. Xiao Han could not keep up with the writing. In addition, I really liked the portrayal of Fan Bingbing in the novel. It brought the young Fan Bingbing to life. Highly recommended. Chapter 603. So rich, so domineering. Fat Dragon and Poplar Fruit walked side by side to Xiong Jishi's stilted house, sighing along the way. Just a moment ago, Poplar Fruit had placed a huge order of 1 million yuan with Kai Simin through Zheng Yujie. Since Fat Dragon had already verified the practicality and plasticity of Kai Simin's machines, Poplar Fruit decided not to drag it out any longer. He wanted to start building the basic framework for his long-distance education as soon as possible. Xiong Village and the two neighboring Hmong villages had a total of 323 children who needed to go to primary school, excluding Xiong Xiaolin and the others who were admitted to the county's junior high school. The computers, display screens, servers, and other equipment cost about 600,000 yuan. Poplar Fruit also asked Kai Simin to help buy other matching equipment, such as projector equipment, video equipment, and other materials that were enough to build a truly ultra-modern internet classroom. Therefore, Poplar Fruit gave Kai Simin 1 million yuan in advance. This was also based on his trust in Zheng Yujie. With the Zheng family in Beijing keeping an eye on Kai Simin, he wasn't afraid that Kai Simin would abscond with the money. Originally, Poplar Fruit wanted to buy suitable computer desks for the children. However, Xiong Kahu didn't allow any explanation from Poplar Fruit's extravagant spending. There were so many skilled craftsmen in the village. Usually, if there was a lack of furniture, wouldn't they come up with it themselves? Why would they need to buy it? Therefore, Xiong Kahu asked Fat Dragon to find the design of a computer desk. He found someone to design and build it. Not only that, in order to match Poplar Fruit's long-distance education plan, Xiong Kahu also ambitiously looked for the elders and the leaders of the other two villages to discuss. They were prepared to rebuild the original school. Even if they didn't rebuild it, they would do a large-scale renovation, redesign the circuit layout, and so on. Poplar Fruit also donated 200,000 yuan to them. However, this was all for later. After transferring so much money, Poplar Fruit checked his account and found that he was poor again. The money he earned from selling the game was squandered by him. After investing and donating, Yang's own account was only left with a little over 1 million. 1 million yuan. It wasn't even enough to buy a house in Yangcheng. Looks like I have to start earning money again. Otherwise, I can't do anything. Poplar Fruit thought gloomily. Yang's plan was to end her vacation early. Starting tonight, she would pick up the translation that she had put aside for almost 2 months. Speaking of which, Brother Yao Dehua had already complained about him several times. But when Yang Guo gave him a training plan for interpreters, he disappeared without a trace. There was one more thing to prepare. That was the plan to open a publishing house that Yang Guo talked to Zheng Yujie about in the morning. Although it was none of Yang Guo's business how to open a publishing house, he planned to test the waters of online novel translation starting today. When everything was ready, Poplar Fruit planned to have enough stock. That way, when Zheng Yujia set up the canon of the publishing house, Poplar Fruit could provide her with ammunition. At night, everyone gathered in Poplar Fruit's house to celebrate Zheng Yujia's birthday. Everyone here referred to Poplar Fruit, Kiki, Xiong Xiaolin, and Xiong Xiaofeng. Fat Dragon was very self-aware. He ran over to Zheng Yujia and wished her well before running back to his room to play with his phone. Poplar Fruit felt a little shabby celebrating Zheng Yujia's birthday. The conflict with Liang Huan the county in the morning ruined Poplar Fruit's plan. He didn't get to buy a birthday cake, so he could only use the rice cake made by Yi Yu-san. I'm a year older now, but I still want to wish Sister Yujia to continue to be young and beautiful. 18 every year. Poplar Fruit smiled and handed the wooden pig carving that he showed to Zheng Yujia to Zheng Yujia. In exchange, she looked at him. Zheng Yujia raised her head arrogantly and said, "Who said I'm a year older? It's my birthday, and I only receive gifts. I'm not a year older." These words even rhymed. The children giggled, especially Xiong Xiaolin. She had a look of envy on her face, and she wished that she could also become an indomitable, manly woman like Sister Yujia. This gift doesn't count. Zheng Yujia shook the wooden carving that Poplar Fruit gave her and smiled meaningfully. Poplar Fruit nodded honestly and said, "I know, this is just a substitute. After I learn it, I will definitely carve a rabbit for you. That rabbit is also a matter of the future. Today is my birthday. Don't you have anything to say?" Zheng Yujia blinked her eyes and began to be unreasonable again. "Then what do you want me to say?" Poplar Fruit scratched his head and asked. He was really not prepared at all. I want you. No, you guys are too insincere." Zheng Yujia's eyes turned, and she stretched out her white jade finger and pointed at Poplar Fruit. Then she swept a glance at the children who were watching the fun and said with a smile, "I want to punish all of you. Each of you will perform a performance, and you are not allowed to repeat it. Consider it as compensation for my birthday." Kiki was still there watching Aunt Zheng Yujia bully her father and giggled happily. In the end, her father picked her up and patted her little butt. He pretended to be angry and said, still laughing, "What's the use of having a daughter like you? You're helping an outsider. Hey, now you're asking for trouble, aren't you?" Aya. Kiki cutely covered her eyes with her hands and shyly shook her head and cried, "It's all Papa's fault." Auntie, don't blame Kiki, okay? However, how could Zheng Yujia let these little guys go? Poplar Fruit would not suffer by himself. He laughed and pulled these little guys into the water together. The performance was not allowed to be repeated. That is, if one person sang, then the people behind could only perform something else. After explaining the rules of the game, Poplar Fruit's face turned green. He did not have any artistic cells. Xiong Xiaofeng was the smartest. He pulled his sister to perform a meow dance first. Although there was no accompaniment and the two of them were still very inexperienced in dancing, they won because it was fresh. This was an eye-opener for Poplar Fruit and the others. "Haha, not bad, not bad." Zheng Yujia laughed and gave them a thumbs up. "I'll let it go this time. The next group is not allowed to be together and perform one by one." Zheng Yujia caught Poplar Fruit and Kiki, who wanted to follow suit and get away with it. "Then I'll sing a song." Poplar Fruit took the first step. In front of the game, even if Kiki was his daughter, Poplar Fruit did not have any intention of giving in. "Oh, Papa is so bad. Don't." Chi-Chi also wants to sing. Chi-Chi pouted her small mouth and unrelentingly patted this big bad father's chest. "No." Poplar Fruit held back his laughter and said seriously, "If Papa sings a song, Kiki can only perform something else." Chapter 604. Horses gallop south. People look north. A few rooms away, there was actually an impassioned singing coming through. Fat Dragon shook his head and put on his headphones. He clicked his tongue and said to himself, "Poplar Fruit is singing again. What a tragedy. Why doesn't this child understand?" Poplar Fruit shamelessly snatched the singing program from his daughter. Unfortunately, with his singing skills, he could only be reduced to noise. Being out of tune was not terrible. What was terrible was that Poplar Fruit did not know that he was out of tune. This song, Loyalty to the Country, was actually very high key. Poplar Fruit was not afraid of it. He was able to concentrate his chi in his dantian, and he could roar out any high key. However, Poplar Fruit singing was not above that point. In the last 2 words, Poplar Fruit sang only 4 words. Fortunately, although Zheng Yujie was convulsing with laughter and did not care about her image, she still clapped for Poplar Fruit at the end. However, her red cheeks were obviously faking it. Poplar Fruit's face turned red. He knew his own situation. Although he could not tell, he could guess that it was easy for him to sing out of tune. Therefore, after singing, he quickly sat down. He pushed Kiki and said with a smile, "Kiki, it's your turn." Kiki's pink little face was tight. She squeezed into her father's arms, played with his fingers, and said, "Kiki wants to sing. You can't sing? Your father has already sung." Zheng Yujie said with a smile. Kiki unhappily twisted her body and muttered, "Papa, Kiki wants to sing." Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "How about this? Kiki, you tell us a story. Tell us the story of the tortoise and the lion that you told me last time." "A tortoise and a lion?" Zheng Yujie asked curiously. "Shouldn't it be a tortoise and a rabbit?" She was thinking about the story of the tortoise and the rabbit. "No." Poplar Fruit smiled. He nudged Kiki and looked at Kiki encouragingly. Hearing her father mention the tortoise and the lion, Kiki blinked her eyes. Her previous unhappy expression had faded. However, Kiki did not have the courage to stand up and tell a story in front of others. With her father's encouragement, Kiki finally shyly stood up from her father's arms. "Once upon a time, there was a tortoise brother," Kiki said weakly. "There is no past." Poplar Fruit patted Kiki's little butt and said with a smile, "Did you learn Dad's mantra when telling stories?" With her father's jesting, Kiki finally calmed down and began to tell her story seriously. Speaking of which, Kiki was the same as Poplar Fruit. They were both professional players. Usually, they did not show off and gave people a feeling that they were not trustworthy. However, once they started to take it seriously, their performance on the spot would be impressive. Kiki was the same. Now, her voice was very clear, and there was a little excitement on her face. Brother Tortoise and Brother Lion fought. Then Brother Tortoise said, "Hey, before we fight, can you tie up your hair first?" Kiki jumped forward and pointed her finger forward. Although she was imitating the choral tone, her voice was so soft that people could not help but want to laugh. Zheng Yujie was the first to laugh out loud. Her reaction was a little faster than the Xiong siblings, and she immediately understood the burden that Chi-Chi had thrown at her. However, because Zheng Yujie was laughing so happily, Kiki was a little timid. She stopped and looked back at her father. "It's okay, continue." Poplar Fruit patted his daughter's head encouragingly. "You just told a great story. Continue, continue." Zheng Yujie put away her smile and sat up straight as she said. Brother Lion heard it. He also said, then put down your bag first." Kiki twisted her hands on her shoulders and acted as if she was taking off her bag. After a moment of silence, Zheng Yujie finally understood the meaning of taking off her bag. She patted the bed again and laughed without caring about her image. Io, Kiki's story is so interesting, haha." Xiong Xiaofeng still didn't quite understand, but an older sister who understood went close to his ear and explained. Poplar Fruit's eyes were smiling. Seeing his daughter make Zheng Yujie laugh, he felt a sense of accomplishment. Zheng Yujie finally got tired of laughing and climbed up from the bed. She pulled Kiki into her arms and kissed Kiki's face hard. She laughed and said, "Kiki's story is so funny. This is Andy's favorite birthday present." "Thank you, Kiki." Kiki, who was praised, shyly covered her little face. She was also very happy at this time and felt that she was really awesome. Zheng Yujie's birthday did not last long. She had been busy the whole day. She ran to take a shower early and then pulled her new favorite, Kiki, to sleep. Poplar Fruit washed his clothes and came to Fat Dragon's room. This guy is really a nocturnal animal. He was tired the whole day, including not sleeping at noon, but now he was not sleepy at all. Poplar Fruit was called by him. Fruit, something happened. Fat Dragon said mysteriously to Poplar Fruit and waved. What happened? Poplar Fruit frowned and came to Fat Dragon's side. He sat down and then looked at his big screen phone. Hey, why is there a photo of me? To be exact, it was a photo of Poplar Fruit in the mall in the morning. It was taken by the surveillance camera and his ID card. See? Fat Dragon pointed to the photo and said to Poplar Fruit, now all the toll booths at the entrance of the highway in Lidong, as well as several road intersections near us. There are policemen with your photo and information guarding. Where did this come from? Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. I found it. The Lidong Public Security Bureau has all your information. Fat Dragon said. It was released in the afternoon by the director named Lu Guoyang. Am I wanted? Poplar Fruit asked with a frown. To be exact, you are being targeted by the police in this county. Fat Dragon corrected. You are wanted. You didn't commit any heinous crimes. Even if he is the director of the Public Security Bureau, he has no right to put you on the wanted list. Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, what about you? Did you get into trouble because of me? No, they can't seem to find our information. Fat Dragon laughed and said, they can recognize us with just a video. Do you think this is an American blockbuster? You, on the other hand, were easily found because your license plate number was recorded. I'm fine. They can't catch me. Poplar Fruit shook his head. He didn't feel scared at all. They can't catch you. You are hiding in the mountains. But if you go down the mountain, or if you drive your car out, you will still be caught. Fat Dragon curled his lips and said. Chapter 605. Also, I don't think it's a good idea to continue like this. Fat Dragon saw that Poplar Fruit didn't seem to be worried. Instead, he said worriedly, if Kai Simin's side is fast, he'll send the goods over in half a month at the latest. What should we do then? I think that if a foreign vehicle comes in, they'll definitely check it. Moreover, it's being sent to Xiong Family Village. What if it gets detained? Kai Simin actually didn't take long to prepare the goods. On one hand, he had been preparing for it after Zhang Yujia asked. On the other hand, he was in Beijing's Silicon Valley. He didn't dare to say anything else. Just these few hundred special computer parts, Kai Simin didn't even need to personally go out to buy them. He just needed to make a phone call, and they would all be delivered within half an hour. Fat Dragon's problem really needed to be solved. Poplar Fruit was still thinking that taking down a county's executive deputy county head, who was also the person with the most power, would require long-term planning. But now, it seemed that this long-term planning couldn't wait any longer. Poplar Fruit frowned and asked, how's your evidence collection going? At Meng Ping's house, Fat Dragon found a lot of evidence, but most of it was about the corrupt leaders in the Education Bureau. There wasn't any evidence that could guarantee that they would kill Liang Huaxing's father, Liang Shangtao. Finally, they got to the main topic. Fat Dragon tapped on his phone screen and jumped to another interface. He then said, I just checked Lu Guoyang, Liang Shangtao, and the other people in their faction's computers and phones. There is some evidence, but it's still not enough. Fat Dragon sighed, shook his head, and said, how many people put their key evidence on the internet now? Moreover, it's these 50-plus-year-old men. Using a computer to go online is more or less enough. That won't do. Poplar Fruit frowned and said, without evidence, we can't take them down. Even if we can take down a few vermin, they're just small characters. They can't decide anything. However, Fat Dragon's expression wasn't very depressed. He laughed and said, there is evidence, but you have to get it. What do you mean? Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. Fat Dragon showed a picture to Poplar Fruit. It was a screenshot of a mobile phone interface. He said, this was found on director Lu Guoyang's mobile phone. It was lying in the trash, but I still found it. What made Fat Dragon so excited? Poplar Fruit saw that it was a message that had been deleted. It had an address and an account book hidden in a certain location. Fat Dragon explained, this should be the evidence of Liang Shengtao's crimes. He wrote the account book himself. If I'm not wrong, all the red packets and bribes he received over the years are recorded in it. It was the eternal account book of those corrupt officials. They had to remember it. Although it was a time bomb to them, they could still use it as a black account to threaten them when they needed it. Since it's Liang Shengtao's things, how did Lu Guoliang know about it? Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. According to some of his text messages, it seems that he found a secret property of Liang Shengtao's. After he searched it himself, he found this evidence. However, he's still with Liang Shengtao, so he didn't reveal it. Fat Dragon laughed and said this guy was afraid that he would forget, so he used his mobile phone to send a text message to himself. He only deleted it after he went back and wrote it down. Even if they're on the same side, they have ulterior motives and are wary of each other. Poplar Fruit shook his head. He looked at Fat Dragon and said, "Are you sure this evidence can bring down Liang Shengtao?" Poplar Fruit twisted his arms and waist. Needless to say, Poplar Fruit had already made up his mind to do it himself. Fat Dragon nodded and said, "Most likely. Give me the address." Poplar Fruit said with a serious expression, "There's no time to lose. I'll go down the mountain tonight." Fat Dragon was shocked and said, "Tonight? Isn't it too late?" "It's okay. Kiki is asleep, and Yujia is watching over her. It's even more inconvenient during the day." Poplar Fruit smiled calmly and said, "Also, it's more convenient to move at night. They won't know that I'm going out at this time." Poplar Fruit and Fat Dragon went to find Xiong Kahu to discuss this matter. Xiong Kahu was an old man. When he was young, he often ran thousands of miles in the middle of the night and killed enemy generals in their sleep. When he heard Poplar Fruit's plan, not only did he not object, he even praised, "A good man should be fearless." However, Xiong Kahu was not as reckless as Poplar Fruit. He was experienced and immediately came up with a plan for Poplar Fruit. He even said cautiously, "Go to the county. I'll let Jisher go with you. The two of you can take care of each other." Although he was confident in his own strength, Poplar Fruit still agreed to his master's arrangement. After changing into black night clothes, which was actually a black and blue meow tight jacket and leggings, Poplar Fruit went down a mountain with Xiong Kahu. Fat Dragon installed a few apps in Poplar Fruit's phone. Therefore, Poplar Fruit could receive instructions from the command center when he plugged in his headphones. Xiong Kahu looked at it with interest at first, but later he felt bored and chased Fat Dragon back. He was really able to sleep. He was not worried about Poplar Fruit at all. For the old man, Poplar Fruit's trip was really nothing compared to the bullets he had experienced before. Because the forest was dark at night, although there were no large beasts nearby, the mountain roads were difficult to travel. Xiong Kahu walked in front with a powerful flashlight to lead the way, but the two still spent 2 hours to get down the mountain. "Brother Chow! Brother Chow!" Xiong Kahu knocked on the door of the small store gently. The old man inside was already asleep, but Xiong Kahu was still tidying up. He heard the sound and walked out. "Why are you going down the mountain in the middle of the night?" Xiong Kahu looked at him and Poplar Fruit behind him and asked, "I'm going to the county to do something. The chief ordered me to," Xiong Kahu said. "Brother Chow, Brother Yang's car is being checked now. It's not convenient for him to go on the road. Let me borrow your motorcycle for a while." Xiong Kahu heard that it was the chief's order and did not ask further. He nodded, took out his keys, and pushed the motorcycle out from the backyard. The motorcycle was not a high-end road-going sports car. It was just a normal Suzuki King, the most common street car in the country. "Be careful." Xiong Kahu patted the back seat of a motorcycle and handed it to Xiong Kahu. It was not clear whether he was referring to the person or the car. Xiong Kahu and Poplar Fruit nodded at him. Xiong Kahu did not send them off and went back to sleep casually. Xiong Kahu was more familiar with the roads. He sat in the front as the driver, and Poplar Fruit sat in the back. With a roar, a rainbow figure drove towards the county in the dark. All right, I forgot to mention last night that Kiki's story was taken from Running_Man. It's not very funny, but it's all said by a child. It's very cute, isn't it? Chapter 606. Although it was already the end of summer, the world seemed to still be immersed in the sultry heat of summer. The chirping of cicadas on both sides of the road didn't stop even though it was late at night. However, the motorcycle was shuttling through the winding road without a helmet. The whistling wind blew away the heat in their hearts, and their excited minds were surprisingly calm. How do we go forward? Poplar Fruit heard Fat Dragon's instructions from the headset and shouted loudly. 2 kilometers from here is the inspection place. We can't go there in front of the police. Even though it was the middle of the night, there was still a lot of traffic on the national highway. There were trucks with headlights on in front and behind. Fat Dragon had insight into the location of the police through the GPS positioning. Along the way, he had informed Poplar Fruit and the others that they had avoided the inspection place. However, this time, Poplar Fruit and the others were in trouble at the last checkpoint of the county town. It seemed that Fat Dragon couldn't see a path on the map that they could take. Got it. Xiong Jishir raised his hand and shouted loudly, "Sit tight." Before they got close to the inspection place, Xiong Jishir pressed on the brake and turned right. The motorcycle ran over the shoulder of the road and fell directly into the field. Fortunately, it wasn't a paddy field, and the wheels fell steadily on the ground. However, because the field was soft, the rear wheels spun crazily in the soil when they fell, raising a lot of soil behind them. Virum! Xiong Jishir twisted his right hand and stepped on the accelerator. The motorcycle jumped out of the pit and drove forward. It was a little exciting, the feeling of taking an unusual road. Poplar Fruit was sitting in the back, holding the edge of the seat tightly. Although it was a little unstable, his eyes flashed with excitement. The crops hadn't been harvested yet, and there were still rice seedlings in the field. When they jumped off, the wheels accidentally knocked down 2 of them. After the motorcycle started moving, Xiong Jishir held the front of the motorcycle very firmly, and the motorcycle kept driving through the gap in the middle. After driving through 3 acres of fields, this unusual road came to an end. Xiong Jishir drove on a small road in a village. He was afraid that he would wake up the villagers, so he slowed down the speed of the motorcycle. The noise was relatively low, and only the barking of dogs came from a few houses not far away. Near the village entrance on the left seemed to be the inspection place. The shaking tricolor police lights gave people a depressing feeling. However, Poplar Fruit and the others didn't know whether it was because they were a few hundred meters or the inspection place was very lax, but it was still quiet, as if nothing had happened. After driving out of the village's field, Yanghua and the others returned to the main road. This time, there was no obstruction. The only thing they needed to pay attention to was the cameras at the intersection. In order to ensure that they wouldn't be tracked, Xiong Jishir had to carefully avoid them. Fortunately, Fat Dragon was there, so Poplar Fruit and Xiong Jishir's motorcycle didn't appear in the cameras. Stop under the tree over there. Poplar Fruit pointed to a small alley on the side of the road and asked Xiong Jishir to hide the motorcycle inside. 2 streets away, it was Liang Shengtao's gold cave that Fat Dragon had mentioned. Poplar Fruit planned to walk there. Clang! Poplar Fruit looked back. Xiong Jishir accidentally dropped the key on the ground. The young man was a little nervous. After picking up the key, he didn't know where to put his hands. He didn't have the psychological quality of his master. Poplar Fruit smiled, patted Xiong Jishir's shoulder, and said, "You don't have to follow. Wait for me here." "That, Brother Yang," Xiong Jishir whispered anxiously. "Don't I need to help?" "Don't worry, I can handle it." Poplar Fruit smiled. He squatted down and tied his shoelaces, then looked around. If it was Yangcheng, there would still be a lot of cars and pedestrians, even in the wee hours of the morning. However, in Litong County, where food and clothing were a problem, it naturally couldn't afford this kind of nightlife. The streets were empty, and the street lights were all turned off. It was as if it was an empty city. Building 6, 301. Poplar Fruit climbed over the wall and entered the neighborhood that Fat Dragon had mentioned. He heard Fat Dragon's voice. He was worried that Poplar Fruit wouldn't remember it. Poplar Fruit ignored him and groped along the wall. Finally, he found a 6th building that Fat Dragon had mentioned. It was a small, old residential area, but because it was relatively close to the city center, the nearby traffic was very convenient. From this point of view, it was indeed a good hiding place. This kind of old residential building didn't even have a security guard, let alone a surveillance camera. Therefore, Poplar Fruit looked at the dark 301 and walked into the corridor. It wasn't the first time that Poplar Fruit had been a thief, but he didn't know how to pick locks, so he wasn't a qualified thief. Looking at the cold iron door, Poplar Fruit scratched his head. He had to climb up the sewer pipe again. Poplar Fruit jumped to the window of the corridor. He was skilled and daring, so he wasn't afraid that he would slip and fall. Before he came up, Poplar Fruit had observed that his right hand slightly touched the inner edge of the wall. Then he turned his body outside and quickly grabbed the sewer pipe with his left hand. Then he climbed up agilely like a monkey. This was the benefit of practicing the 8 steps meteor kick. The flexibility of his legs was greatly increased, and this series of movements was as smooth as a shooting star. This was just the beginning. Poplar Fruit started climbing from the 2nd and a half floor, so he would reach the 3rd floor after another half floor. Poplar Fruit grabbed the window with one hand and then let go of his other hand. His legs, which were holding the sewer pipe, swung in the air. The sound of metal rubbing against each other was very soft. Poplar Fruit had already climbed up the anti-theft net on the balcony of 301. The anti-theft net couldn't stop a flying thief like Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit knew that the anti-theft net had a small escape window. In less than half a minute, Poplar Fruit found the small window. Of course, just as Poplar Fruit thought, there was a small lock on it. Already prepared, Poplar Fruit grabbed the fence with one hand and fumbled in the small tool bag at his waist with the other hand. He took out a medium-sized vise. In order to solve any possible problems, Poplar Fruit asked for a lot of tools from his master. His master also had tools to open locks, but Poplar Fruit didn't know how to use them, so it was useless. The vise bit on one side of the lock. Poplar Fruit's left hand slightly exerted force, and with a snap, the lock broke. Poplar Fruit gently twisted the small lock, took it out, and put it in the small bag at his waist. Then, he gently shook the small escape door. The anti-theft net, which was rusty due to the wind and rain, was difficult to open. Poplar Fruit shook it so that it wouldn't make too much noise and attract the attention of the surrounding residents. Chapter 607. Creak. Even though he took a long time, when he opened the anti-theft net, an ear-piercing sound pierced through the sky. Luckily, it wasn't too loud. It was a decibel lower than the sound of cicadas on the tree. Poplar Fruit was silent for a moment. When he didn't find any movement, he let out a sigh of relief. Climbing in wasn't a problem. Poplar Fruit was very flexible. Even if one of his hands was hanging in the air, he could easily curl up his body and stuff his 2 feet in. With a light jump, Poplar Fruit landed on the balcony floor without making a sound. Pushing the door open, Poplar Fruit let out a sigh of relief. Luckily, Liang Shengtao didn't go crazy and lock the entire department. This saved Poplar Fruit a lot of trouble. There was no one in the room. Poplar Fruit turned on the small flashlight tied to his headgear and easily entered the room. Which room is it in? Poplar Fruit knew it was in the bedroom, but there were 3 bedrooms inside. He had to search one by one. There was no need to ask Fat Dragon. Plus, he didn't know. It should be here. Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up. The first time he opened the door, he saw the bedroom that looked very similar to the picture Fat Dragon showed him. What a coincidence! It was indeed a coincidence. There were 3 bedrooms. Poplar Fruit didn't believe it. He opened the door one by one and found that the decoration in each room was different. In other words, the guest room that Poplar Fruit first opened was the room he was looking for. The bill wasn't hidden in the master bedroom. It was hidden in the most inconspicuous guest room. Gently lifting the mattress, a black leather notebook was quietly lying inside. Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up. This is it. Clang, clang. Before Poplar Fruit could reach out to grab it, the sound of a key knocking on the door lock suddenly came from the dead silent room. The air seemed to be cut open and then suddenly seemed to be frozen. Damn it, someone's here? Poplar Fruit's pupils shrank. He didn't have time to scold Fat Dragon for not reminding him. He quickly put down the mattress and turned off the small flashlight. Although he was very anxious, Poplar Fruit still tiptoed and did not make any sound. The sound of the key was like a countdown clock, clearly telling Poplar Fruit that someone was about to come in. No, Poplar Fruit was just about to hide when he remembered that he had opened the doors of the 3 bedrooms. In the end, he was still inexperienced, and didn't remember to close the door after opening it. As long as that person saw it, even if he was brainless, he would know that something had happened. No. Poplar Fruit turned around and ran. When he ran, he tiptoed, and his whole body floated between the rooms. There was an outer iron door and an inner wooden door. The lock of the outer iron door was already open and was being pulled open. It would take at most 4 seconds to open the door. Poplar Fruit quickly closed the door of the guest room. At this time, all the muscles in his body were mobilized and his mind was focused like never before. Poplar Fruit pulled the door hard and slowly locked it. The switch was seamless. 1, 2. It was too fast. Poplar Fruit's figure had already created a light breeze in the living room. However, even though it was fast, it was rare that he didn't make any sound during the whole process. There was still the last one. Bada! The crisp sound of the door lock was heard. The last wooden door was unlocked. Poplar Fruit immediately flashed into the master bedroom. Just as his figure disappeared, the wooden door was pushed open. The last one. Fine beads of sweat appeared on Poplar Fruit's forehead. He was about to suffocate. Usually, when he went to exercise in the morning, he would exercise twice as much as a normal person to make Poplar Fruit sweat. Poplar Fruit suppressed the nervousness in his heart. He clenched his teeth and gently closed the door of the master bedroom. Then he gently closed it. Finally, he slowly let go of the door handle and let the lock be gently locked. Tap, tap. The person who came in didn't take off his shoes. The sound of leather shoes on the ground was gradually approaching. Poplar Fruit was stunned. The person was at the door. Poplar Fruit had just let go of the door handle when he saw the door handle twist and was about to be pushed open. It was a close call. Poplar Fruit didn't have time to find a place to hide. He steeled his heart, moved his feet, took a deep breath, and shrunk his body into a thin line. He was squeezed tightly behind the open door. The space behind the door was very small. In order to not let the person who opened the door feel strange, Poplar Fruit had already tried his best to breathe out the air in his body. He also raised his arms and stood like a bamboo pole. The person wasn't discovered. The footsteps of the person were very relaxed. Then, he felt for the light switch. Pa! The entire master bedroom was brightly lit. Poplar Fruit was still worried. He didn't dare to relax at all. Who knew if the person who came in would suddenly have the idea to close the door from inside? Then, Poplar Fruit would be exposed. Plop! The person who came in lay on the bed. Poplar Fruit's heart was slightly relieved. He only heard the person let out a comfortable sigh. It seemed that he was stretching. Listening to the voice, it should be a man, and he wasn't young either. If Poplar Fruit didn't guess wrong, he was the owner of this house, Liang Shengtao. Why did he come back? Poplar Fruit was quite helpless. He heard from Fat Dragon that Liang Shengtao had a few properties. Other than his home, the one he went to the most was the Hidden Beauty Cave, a nickname given by Fat Dragon opposite of the Hidden Gold Cave. Poplar Fruit thought that he could steal the account book and leave without anyone knowing. He didn't expect Liang Shengtao to come back. What Poplar Fruit and Fat Dragon didn't know was that Liang Shengtao usually hid the money that people gave him at home. As long as the hidden money reached 50,000 yuan, he would transfer it here. Today, Poplar Fruit was really lucky to run into him. Poplar Fruit could only curl up and take small breaths. He couldn't use too much force, otherwise, the door would be broken open by Poplar Fruit. After a while, there was a burst of laughter from a bed. Poplar Fruit was almost scared. He thought that the old man had gone crazy. Hee, you don't want me to be the county magistrate, so you have a good life? He only heard Liang Shengtao talking to himself. Li Dong is my world. You foreigners can fuck it. Ha ha ha. Through the crack in the door, Poplar Fruit could still see his crazy and arrogant look. Poplar Fruit was speechless. He felt that his ears had been polluted. He knew that Liang Shengtao could do whatever he wanted in Lidong. He also knew that his son was a tyrant. Then, he heard from Fat Dragon that Liang Huasheng wasn't like Liang Shengtao at all. Liang Shengtao was very shrewd. But now it seemed that Liang Shengtao was indeed very shrewd. He pretended to be cautious on the outside, but secretly, he was a narcissist. Like father, like son, Liang Huasheng's personality was inherited from his father. After a while, Poplar Fruit's heart was in a mess. He frowned and wondered why the old man hadn't left yet. Even though Poplar Fruit's physical fitness was good, if he curled up like that, he wouldn't be able to take it. But the world outside the crack in the door suddenly changed. Chapter 608. Walla walla. Separated by a wooden door, Yang Guo could clearly hear the strange sound coming from the master bedroom. In the end, Poplar Fruit couldn't hold back. He grabbed the wooden door with one hand to prevent it from being pushed open. Then he stuck his head forward and peeked through the small gap in the door. The scene in front of him made him stunned. The big bed that Liang Shengtao was lying on was moved by the mechanism and slowly flipped up. After flipping open, a flat safe was revealed. Poplar Fruit thought that the bottom of the big bed was solid and couldn't hide anyone, so Poplar Fruit hid behind the door. However, he didn't expect that not only was the bottom hollow, but a part of the floor was also hollowed out. That was how the large safe that Poplar Fruit saw could be placed. As for how big the safe was, Poplar Fruit felt that if it was empty, it wouldn't be a problem to stuff two people in. Probably guessing what Liang Xingtao was going to do next, Poplar Fruit had an idea. He gently pushed the door open a little so that his left hand could be put down. He took out his phone from his trouser pocket and quickly closed the gap in the door. Liang Xingtao's attention was on the safe in front of him. He didn't pay attention to Poplar Fruit's little movements behind him. Poplar Fruit turned on the recording function of his phone. After a little adjustment, Poplar Fruit tried to take a picture through the gap in the door. However, Poplar Fruit looked at the screen and frowned. The angle wasn't very good. Liang Xingtao's body was somewhat blocking the safe. After thinking about it, Poplar Fruit raised the phone. Poplar Fruit was very tall. When he raised his hand, it was much higher than the upper edge of the door. So if Liang Xingtao looked back, he would definitely see a hand inexplicably reaching out from the top of the door. It was holding a phone. The phone was silently taking pictures. Poplar Fruit was also quietly peeking through the gap in the door. It was past 3 o'clock at night. It was Poplar Fruit's bedtime, but Poplar Fruit wasn't sleepy at all. His eyes were wide open and full of excitement. Liang Xingtao's body was somewhat blocked. Poplar Fruit only saw him enter some password and open the safe. This time, Poplar Fruit saw that the large safe was actually stuffed with a lot of things. The most important thing was money, a lot of money. Liang Xingtao wasn't in a hurry to put the money in. Instead, he took out a small black bag from inside. It was a bit like the protective bag Poplar Fruit used to store his MP3 player in high school. However, it seemed that the texture of this small bag was better. He was breathing heavily as he opened the small bag and poured out a lot of shiny things, which covered Liang Xingtao's palm. 1, 2, 3. Liang Xingtao counted carefully. His eyes were a little blurry. He was very close, and his nose was almost touching. 14, 15, 15. Are they diamonds? Poplar Fruit's eyes were wide open. Not only that, after Liang Xingtao put it away, he took out a small blue bag and continued to pour out a few more diamonds. This one was obviously bigger than the previous ones. Hearing Liang Xingtao count, he counted to 9. After counting, Liang Xingtao put it away with satisfaction. He took a deep breath, as if the sour feeling had seeped into his bones. Then he took out 5 stacks of banknotes from the bag beside him and prepared to put them in. However, Liang Xingtao wasn't in a hurry at all. He actually sat down and grabbed a stack of banknotes to count. Listening to the sound of his counting, it was quite similar to the rhythm of chanting scriptures in front of Buddha. However, it couldn't be compared to chanting scriptures, as that would be an insult to Buddhism. Poplar Fruit took pictures for a while, then put away his phone. He suppressed the urge to replay it and was ready to continue hiding. However, he suddenly felt a little uneasy, as if he had an ominous premonition. No, I can't stay here any longer. Poplar Fruit believed in his premonition. This premonition allowed him to escape a disaster in America. After taking a deep breath, Poplar Fruit mustered up his courage and gently pushed the door open. Liang Xingtao's back appeared in front of Poplar Fruit. However, as Liang Xingtao was busy counting the money, he didn't expect someone to come out from behind him. Poplar Fruit tiptoed out from behind the door, then gently closed the door. The steps he took were the 8 meteor steps kick. He used his body to propel his feet forward. Of course, he didn't really jump. It was just that walking like this made his body light and graceful. When he lifted his feet and landed on the ground, there was no sound. The ominous premonition in his heart suddenly rose. Poplar Fruit quickly turned around, then turned out of the door and hid behind the wall. Poplar Fruit's premonition was right. Just as he left the door, Liang Shengtao happened to look back, but all he saw was an empty and dark living room. Many people had a sixth sense, especially when Poplar Fruit was staring at Liang Shengtao and taking pictures with his phone. Liang Shengtao had always felt that something was wrong, but his sixth sense was much worse than Poplar Fruit's, so it didn't raise his guard. When he was counting the money, he felt a chill on his back, as if someone was watching him. However, when he was counting most of the money in his hand, he didn't want to be distracted and turn around, which gave Poplar Fruit a chance to escape. When he turned around to look, Poplar Fruit had already hidden. Poplar Fruit didn't hide far, and just happened to hide in the door of the guest room next door. At this moment, he was extremely focused, and all of a sudden, he triggered his mysterious sense. Although they weren't in the same line of sight, Poplar Fruit could see Liang Shengtao turn around and glance back. At this moment, a pool of sweat appeared on Poplar Fruit's back. Damn, that was too close. Poplar Fruit couldn't believe that he had dodged so coincidentally. Liang Shengtao looked at the empty room, shook his head, and said self-deprecatingly, "Sigh, I'm getting old. I'm still so paranoid in the middle of the night." After that, he stood up, closed the guest room door, and then sat down to continue counting the money. Luckily, he didn't continue to hide behind the door. Poplar Fruit patted his thumping heart in relief. If he was still hiding inside, Liang Shengtao would definitely discover him as soon as he closed the door. However, this special ability that sometimes didn't work made Poplar Fruit very worried. It seemed that it hadn't appeared for a few months, right? Poplar Fruit just now didn't think that if he had this ability, would Poplar Fruit still need to use his phone to take pictures? Wouldn't it be fine if he just used his sense to see Liang Shengtao's password? It couldn't be helped. Now that he relaxed a little, it couldn't sense him again. Poplar Fruit looked around and felt that it wasn't safe to hide in the door, so he tiptoed through the living room and hid behind the sofa. It was against the wall, and there was a gap where he could hide. Although it was a little dusty and dirty, Liang Shengtao wouldn't have thought that he could hide here. Chapter 609. Finally, after Liang Shengtao was satisfied with counting money, he left his treasure cave in the dead of night. Poplar Fruit came out from behind the sofa. First, he called Xiong Jisher to let him know that he was safe. The young man was a little anxious, and Poplar Fruit was worried that he would think that something had happened to him. Then, he called Fatty Dragon and woke him up from his dreams. Fatty Dragon had fallen asleep in the middle of the task. Before calling Fat Dragon, Poplar Fruit looked at the video on his phone. Even though the iPhone 5 was about to be released, the iPhone 4S in Poplar Fruit's hands was still very competitive. It could shoot 1080p HD videos and had a noise reduction function. Even though it was under incandescent light at night, the recording effect was very good. However, Poplar Fruit still felt that the video wasn't clear enough. Plus, the screen was small, so he couldn't see which passwords Liang Shengtao had pressed in the video. Big discovery. You definitely wouldn't have thought that you would catch a big fish this time. Poplar Fruit excitedly told Fat Dragon about what had just happened. He skipped the thrilling scene and talked about the safe. "Fat Dragon, help me deal with that video. I want the password." "No problem. Watch me." Hearing that there was a big safe, Fat Dragon was also very excited. His sleepiness was immediately dispelled. He held Poplar Fruit's MacBook and rolled up his sleeves. He didn't have any sleeves. He was wearing a singlet, intending to do something big. However, in the era where 4G was still unknown, 3G video transmission software was very slow. The progress bar made people feel like they were crawling like a turtle. Although Poplar Fruit didn't feel bad about burning data, after waiting for a while, he couldn't wait any longer. He simply put his phone aside and took out the black notebook from the guest room. He turned on the flashlight on his headgear and flipped it open. It was a record of when a certain person had given or received something. It was very simple, but this simple entry actually took up half a thick notebook. Looking at the earliest entries, it was actually from 3 years ago. This notebook contained at least 3 years' worth of black accounts. For some reason, there was no previous one. Perhaps Liang Shengtao did not record it before, or perhaps he hid it somewhere else. But this was not important. With this book, it was enough to cause a magnitude 8 earthquake in Li Dong's officialdom. Poplar Fruit found many familiar names on it. Why was it familiar? In the past 2 days, if it wasn't from Meng Ping, it was from Fat Dragon. Most of them were leaders in Lidong County. Some were station chiefs, and some were county magistrates. There were also many names that he had never heard of before. Poplar Fruit guessed that they were probably some of the city's leaders. They were the handles that Fat Dragon had mentioned before. He hid the black leather notebook in his backpack. This time, he came here to get the evidence. He did not even plan to leave any leeway for the other party. Since Liang Shengtao had just been here, Poplar Fruit felt that Liang Shengtao would not come again in the near future. So he simply took the evidence and cut off his escape route. Fat Dragon had finished transferring the data, but he still needed to use the software on Poplar Fruit's computer to process the video file. Otherwise, it would still not be clear. Poplar Fruit took this opportunity to return to the master bedroom. Hee, as the saying goes, a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. This Liang Shengtao is still lacking. Poplar Fruit muttered as he shook his head. Liang Shengtao had hidden all the important things in this place. Although the safe and the account book were hidden separately, it still gave the other party a chance to catch them all in one fell swoop. Yangwu didn't see how Liang Shengtao activated the mechanism to raise the bed, but from the hollow echo, anyone who had read detective novels or manga would know that the bed was hollow. Yangwu didn't see how Liang Shengtao activated the mechanism to raise the bed, but from the hollow echo, anyone who had read detective novels or manga would know that the bed was hollow. But why was there no movement? Where did he hide it? Wait a minute. Why is there something wrong with the bedside lamp? Poplar Fruit realized that the English style of the bedside lamp was somewhat out of place with the other decorations in the room. His eyes lit up, and he slowly leaned over. His hands touched the bedside lamp. It's loose. Poplar Fruit tried to pull the bedside lamp out or press it in, but it did not move. Until he used both hands to twist the bedside lamp clockwise. It was really loose. When he twisted it to 180 degrees, he heard a soft click sound. The bedside lamp stopped, and then the clatter of the mechanism sounded again. This is it. Poplar Fruit quickly moved the quilt and pillow that were about to slip on the bed to the side. The bed was turned over, revealing the huge safe. Is it done? Poplar Fruit was a little anxious. He had been in the room for more than an hour, and the sky was about to turn bright. Okay. Fat Dragon breathed quickly and said, "Holy shit, Gua, did I just see it wrong? That's a diamond. Why do you care what it is? Hurry up and give me the password." Poplar Fruit was speechless as he urged. The password should be 3 6s, 2 8s, and then a 5. The last one seems to be one of the 4 numbers 7, 4, 1, or 2. I didn't see it. It's okay, I'll try. Poplar Fruit said, "Oh right, this safe doesn't have any restrictions on entering the password, right?" Fat Dragon said honestly, "Yes, you only have 3 chances to make a mistake. If you make a mistake 3 times, then the alarm will be triggered." Fat Dragon had just checked the safe's information on the internet. That's 4 chances just right. For possibilities. Even if the first 3 times were wrong, the 4th time must be right. Poplar Fruit said casually. Poplar Fruit didn't let him wait for the 4th time. He felt that Liang Shengtao wouldn't like the number 4, so he decisively pressed 1 on the last number. As a result, the safe really opened. Fisk, you're so fucking lucky. Fat Dragon felt envious. There are a few passports inside. Poplar Fruit swept around with the flashlight. Money, diamonds, and a few bricks of gold. However, he still noticed the passport that was placed at the top of the pile. Fruit, look at the diamonds first. Why do you care about the passports? Fat Dragon said resentfully. Diamonds. Why are you acting like a girl? Poplar Fruit scolded him. What are we doing here this time? Did you forget? What's the rush for diamonds? The passports are already prepared. It seems that Liang Shengtao is ready to escape. Poplar Fruit shook his head and said to Fat Dragon, Luckily, we came at the right time and saw his safe. Look, there's so much money. I estimate that in this safe, including the gold and diamonds, there's no less than 10 million yuan. How greedy! Yang guess was right. Liang Shengtao had been in Kiradong for the past few years. Not including the money he had bribed, he had plundered the already poor Kiradong County to the point that it was thinning by a few layers. The vault of gold was all his hope, especially the safe. As soon as he realized that something was wrong, he would immediately take his wife and children with him, take the huge amount of money and jewelry, and fly out of the country. He had already prepared his escape route, but unfortunately, he met Poplar Fruit. Chapter 610. Fruit, Fruit, do a live broadcast for me. Fat Dragon shamelessly refused to let Poplar Fruit hang up the phone. He even asked him to explain to him while he rummaged through the safe. He really didn't know if he was really as fat as a dragon. Why was he so interested in gold and silver treasures? Passports, hee, I'll take them all, so you can't run away. Yangwa got the key evidence. He was very happy. He put the passports into his bag and whispered to Fatty Dragon, Brother Fatty Dragon, don't worry. Who cares about the passports? Diamonds are the main show. Fat Dragon couldn't wait. Don't be noisy. If you want to listen to the live broadcast, don't talk nonsense. Poplar Fruit laughed and scolded. Now that there was only Poplar Fruit left in the room, he could say whatever he wanted. He also waited for a while, so he wasn't worried that Deputy County Magistrate Liang would come back. Finally, he took out the 2 bags of diamonds and weighed them in his hand. They really felt very little, as if they were light. However, who knew the value of these diamonds? Poplar Fruit took out a few diamonds from each bag and carefully observed them under the flashlight. He found that they were all high-quality goods. The cut edges were smooth and didn't cut his hand. They were crystal clear, and there were no impurities. When Poplar Fruit was in the foreign trade business, during Du Ronghui and his wife's 25th wedding anniversary, he accompanied the manager to a few jewelry shops. He more or less knew about diamonds. The size of the diamonds in the black bag was relatively uniform. Poplar Fruit estimated that it should be between 1.5 to 2 carats, definitely less than 2 carats. The diamonds in the blue bag were large. Most of them were 3 carats or slightly smaller. There were even 2 that were the size of a fingernail, at least 4 carats. Even Poplar Fruit felt his heart beat faster when he saw them. Poplar Fruit couldn't tell which grade it was, but he felt that whether it was a black bag or a blue bag, they weren't worse than the F-grade ones he saw in the jewelry store. If that was the case, then according to the market price 2 years ago, the total value of the 15 black bags would be about 3 million yuan. As for the blue bags, Poplar Fruit made a rough estimation. He sucked in a breath of cold air. Excluding the 2 big diamonds, the total value of the 5 bags should be close to 5 million yuan. As for the 2 big diamonds, they could easily be sold for 1 million yuan each. Of course, what Poplar Fruit said was only the value on the surface. If it was sold on the black market, it would definitely shrink a lot. Even so, the 2 bags of diamonds in Poplar Fruit's hands were already worth nearly 10 million. Even Poplar Fruit, who had always been mentally strong, almost couldn't handle it. Fruit, bring it back, bring it back. Fat Dragon's breathing was a little heavy. He shouted excitedly, I want to give it to my wife. However, Poplar Fruit regained his composure. He shook his head and said, No. Why? It's not heavy. It's our spoils of war. Fat Dragon looked at his phone like he was looking at a fool. He was very puzzled by Poplar Fruit's reaction. Don't tell me you sympathize with this corrupt official? Poplar Fruit laughed and said, Sympathize with your sister. I just feel that it's not right to do this, and I feel guilty. Fruit, when did you become so vulgar? Fat Dragon said anxiously. You left it there, but it was squandered by Liang Shengtao. If we take it back, we could do something good. I want to take it for free. With a 70% discount, I can use the money to do something good for the stockade, right? It's not the same. Poplar Fruit shook his head stubbornly and said, "We came out to search for evidence to bring down this corrupt official, not to steal the money. That way we won't be chivalrous thieves, but real thieves. Do you understand? I don't think you're a greedy person. If you want to make some money with your ability, you could get a lot of dirty money in minutes. But I've never seen you do this. Isn't it because you don't want to go against your conscience to make money?" Poplar Fruit persuaded, "If you need money, I can lend it to you. Even if you want to give the diamond to your wife, I can buy one for you in the future, and I'll buy it in France." Fat Dragon understood the truth of Poplar Fruit's words, but he was still a little unwilling. There was a mountain of gold and silver in front of him, and it seemed to be at his fingertips. There was no risk, but he returned empty-handed. His feeling of pity was different from him not doing it, because he knew that it was illegal to use hacking skills to make dirty money. But what I mean is, if you have so much money to waste, you might as well take it back and spend it on the children in the mountains. With tens of millions, you can build a lot of schools and even buy authentic computers to realize your idea of remote education. Fat Dragon said unwillingly. To be honest, when Fat Dragon mentioned the children, Poplar Fruit's eyes flickered. After all, he was also a hot-blooded young man, and such a chivalrous thing like robbing the rich to help the poor made him waver a little. However, Poplar Fruit's eyes regained their clarity. He shook his head, lowered his voice, and said into the headset's microphone, "No, Poplar Fruit, although I don't have much money, I can still let the children go to school. I can't let this dirty money taint education. Besides, this money must have been taken by Liang Shengtao from the people in Lidong County. It has its own place to go." There was another reason he didn't say, and that was that he had to let Liang Shengtao get the punishment he deserved. "I can't stand you. You're so rigid." Fat Dragon rolled his eyes. In fact, he wasn't that conflicted, but he still wanted to say something to Poplar Fruit. "Then you can leave them there. If Liang Shengtao gets wind of it and runs away with the diamonds and money, you'll regret it." Poplar Fruit wouldn't let himself regret it. He had already thought about what to do next. He wouldn't take the diamonds away, but he wouldn't leave them there for Liang Shengtao to take away. First, Poplar Fruit found a waterproof plastic bag, put the two small bags of diamonds together, tied a knot, and threw them into the water tank of the toilet. Because it wasn't big, Poplar Fruit believed that Liang Shengtao wouldn't have thought that he would hide it there. Next, Poplar Fruit hid the dozens of heavy gold bricks on the top of the wardrobe in the second bedroom. He didn't hide it, but as the saying goes, darkness is darkness under the light. Poplar Fruit didn't believe that Liang Shengtao would be able to find it. There were about hundreds of thousands of yuan and tens of thousands of dollars in the safe, and a few Citibank cards. It looked strange. It seemed that this was where all of Liang Shengtao's stolen money was. Poplar Fruit also hid the few bank cards in the cracks of the gold bricks. As for the rest of the money, Poplar Fruit thought about it and took it out. He put it in a few plastic bags and found a suitable place to hide it. Although it was still hidden in the vault of gold, Poplar Fruit didn't want to leave any hope for Liang Shengtao to make a comeback. In the past, he was cruel to the people. Today, he would make him pay for it one by one. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.